Good evening and welcome to the 13th meeting of fiscal year 2025 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I'd like to now call the meeting to order and begin with introductions of the board and the staff. If you'd like to go around the room, since we have everyone in attendance.
Mag Yieldfield, member.
Cheryl Tagayas, secretary.
Jim Davis, member.
Sean Fahey, member.
And we're glad to have you back, Sean. So nice to see you this evening.
Good to be back. Before we go on, if you don't mind, I just wanted to take a minute to express my gratitude to
Meredith, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
You cannot hear me? Okay, I'm on. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put it up a little bit higher. So yes, so Sean was just about to say
yeah, I just
word or
wanted
two.
to express gratitude to all of you guys for the support. I think everybody knows at this point that my my beautiful wife Janice passed away recently. It was a very sudden diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, and just in 13 weeks Janice was gone. But the support that I've had from the community, board members, our board, the select board, staff, the reach out, we're really blessed. So my children, myself, and Janice has been very well cared for by the community, and I just wanted to express my gratitude to everybody here. And as I said, so many of the staff and the select board and the members of the community of Milton. It's been really, really helpful, and will continue to be helpful. We got a long way to go. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. Glad to have you back. Now to introduce our staff, Tim.
Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development.
And Julia.
Julia Getman, clerk.
And myself, Meredith Hall, serving as chair. I did not mention that. All right, for the first item, we have two sets of minutes to be approved from October 10th and October 23rd. Has everyone, I know Sean was not here, so you can abstain, but have the others had a chance to review?
Unfortunately, I have not yet had a chance to review.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to defer
That's
to our next meeting.
great.
Not a problem. Okay.
So a motion to defer the minutes from October 10th and the 23rd to,
Excuse me, Meredith, there should be three sets, 23rd, 24th, and the 16th.
I think one is just
I'm sorry.
continuation.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
that was just
open
in
and
my
close.
packet.
Yeah.
Sorry, the 23rd, 24th, and the 16th you said, Julia?
I believe so. I'm not
Is it the
sure
10th?
exactly.
I have the 10th in mind. So
The 10th, yes.
So the 10th, 23rd, and 24th. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor to
Aye.
move the
Aye.
minutes. Great. Thank you. And now we have the discussion of next meeting dates. We have currently a scheduled forum for the 14th, which we will discuss under the MBTA. We have our regular scheduled meeting for November 21st, and then the following meeting will be December 12th. So those will be the current upcoming dates. Now, Tim, do you have any updates that you'd like to report?
Not too much. We are in the process of trying to wind down my tenure. I know it's been a little bit of a long goodbye, as it were. So I've had plenty of time to kind of start to try to communicate with all of our consultants that we're working with. I've been working with the town administrator, trying to figure out what things he needs to have his hands on. What things we'll be able to pass off to Julia and Cheyenne. Meredith, I forget if you probably did. We'll be having a meeting the week of the 18th to kind of go over any kind of last, issues and make sure that everyone from staff to the board has a clear understanding of kind of where things stand once I'm out. So we're in that process. Things are going pretty smoothly. Yeah. I don't know, Cheyenne, if you have anything you wanted to share.
Not too much, but I just wanted to note we had an email read a couple days back just with a list of like bike, walk, and transit grant opportunities. I'm looking into those future if everything kind of pans out, but that's just what I'm looking at right now.
And we'll also be meeting with representatives of the Climate Action Planning Committee to kind of firm up our support of them, through different state grant opportunities. We're shut out of a lot of opportunities right now, but that won't last forever. And we want to make sure that we're working with all the various boards and committees in town to help them in their efforts. So thank you for that. That's all we've got for now.
Great, thank you, Tim. And I just wanted to add, I was asked by the chair of the warrant committee just to come and give an update on next Wednesday at their meeting. They just want to hear what potential articles we may have. They're looking at sort of a town, possibly a special town meeting some point in February. It sounds like maybe more likely towards the latter part, but just wanted to give them an update on all of the things that we're working on and sort of where we are in the process and what we might think is realistic to get done. So that will be next Wednesday that I'll be attending that. And yep. And so now we can move to citizens speak. If there's anyone in the public who would like to speak on anything that is not on our agenda this evening, please feel free to come forward, and you can state your name and address for the record. And also online on Zoom, if there's anyone who would like to speak as well. You can raise your hand. Q?
Chair?
Oh, yes. Yes.
I'd like to speak.
Oh, yes, please come forward. Sorry, I didn't see you back there.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Good. Yes.
My name is Brian O'Halloran, and I'm a resident 7 Milton Terrace here in Milton. And I'm here to express my concern about recent discussions on plans for full implementation of the MBTA EOHLC guidelines in Milton. The residents of Milton voted in February of 2024 in a referendum to reject the plan in full implementation. The guidelines are currently under review by the SJC and are likely to be ruled invalid. Until such time as we get a ruling by the SJC, any further discussions and presentations to town residents about MBTA implementation in Milton is irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Anyone else from the audience here on something that's not on the agenda? Are there any hands up? Tim?
None on Zoom.
None on Zoom. Thanks, Ryan. Okay. So we do have a public hearing, which we will be opening at 8 p.m. So before that, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to move up the new business items, which are 10 Bassett Street and 193 Central. So if you would like to join us,
Thank you.
we have time to get you on before.
Good evening.
Good
Michael
evening.
Modestino, representing the applicants, Michael McNoser and Mark McNoser. On behalf of my clients, we submitted a letter asking to withdraw the application that's pending without prejudice, hopefully. And we appreciate, your attention. You put a lot of time into this and would like to come back again, but I think we have to change the plans to accommodate the public and the board. And I think we can do that, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Does anyone want to discuss this, or do we feel like we can have a motion to accept their withdrawal while they work on the plan further?
Can I ask a question
Sure,
first?
yes.
Is there a timeline of when you think you may be before the board again?
I don't really know. I know we need to do some plans and we have to have some discussions about, the big issues, the number of bar seats as we discussed. We're trying to bring that number down considerably. and we have to have some discussions about that. We also have to look at the hours, and we know that we need to bring the hours back to an earlier time. We're just trying to figure out what hours. I mean, I think it's probably in a month or so that we'd be back.
Thank you.
And are you before the ZBA?
No, we're going to file with the ZBA as well on the time, but we're trying to figure out the time.
Right, okay.
Because it will be different than what we had asked for.
Sure.
Did that answer your question, or did you?
No, I just wanted to make a suggestion.
Sure.
If you would meet with the direct abutters, especially Antwerp and
Yeah,
I believe it's Church there, or is it
Yeah.
Franklin? They're the ones that I think will be most impacted by any change in the uses here. And it just would be beneficial, I think, to everyone to have a meeting that's dedicated to them and to hear their concerns before you come to us.
we had one meeting before, and we'll certainly do another one.
Okay, great,
And we'll do the direct abutters.
great. Thank you.
And I would just ask that you, when you're looking at, your new concept, that it's something that would really draw daytime traffic. I'm really concerned about the businesses, the small businesses that are
Yes.
upstairs, and being in more of a nighttime would really hurt the businesses up there.
Yeah.
So drawing earlier in the day and more of a child-friendly atmosphere.
I think you'll see that they want to do some things in the morning, serve breakfast,
great.
and then maybe cut back in the later night hours, particularly on Friday and Saturday.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. So with that, I would entertain a motion to accept the request to withdraw under, and I should,
Without prejudice?
without prejudice, yes.
So moved?
Second,
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
your
very
time.
much.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely,
Have a good
thank you.
night.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right, so now, do we have anyone on Zoom possibly regarding the update on 193 Central Ave Goddard School landscaping?
We have one hand up. Oh, she put it down. Here we go.
Is it Marion?
Jenny Russell.
Jenny? Okay.
Is Marion not in the room?
I do not see Marion now.
Maybe she wasn't expecting to be moved up.
Oh, right.
Tim, can you shoot Marion maybe a quick text or an email, just letting her know that we've moved her up in advance on the agenda?
I will do that.
Thank you. Okay, Jenny, if you would like to say something and introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, it's Helen Russell, actually, and we are directly across the street from 193 Central. We've been in conversation with the owner, Sonny Verma, about the dead trees that are on the front landscape. And he wrote an email to us suggesting he'd like to put in a fence. And we're in support as long as the fence is, kind of the expectation we have. We don't know specifically what the fence will look like, but we think a fence would solve some of the problems.
So I think we can, while we're waiting for Marion to come on, I don't know, has anyone been able to go out and take a look at the site? I know we're all familiar with the Goddard School and the project.
Yeah, I have. I've driven by
Okay.
and parked out front and stared at it. And there are 4 big pine trees that are dead. And I was wondering if they could just replant them, but I understand now there's ledge under there, so it's probably not going to happen. I just wonder, in looking at the map that they sent, there's a little red line that shows where they want to put a fence. And I think that there are dead trees on both sides of the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if they need a fence on both sides of the sidewalk, basically. That's what I was going to ask.
You mean the
Yeah,
sidewalk?
and Meredith, if I can just kind
Not
of
the street sidewalk.
Sure.
piggyback
Yes,
off
Tim.
of that. And now that we've got Ms. Russell on the line, aside from the trees being dead and kind of contributing to not a great looking landscape, what is the problem that the fence is meant to solve?
Well, I think in the initial application, when Goddard was coming, was planning the building, their intention, at least that was made clear to the neighbors, was they were planning to build a berm and then plant the berm so that the cars, and in particular the headlights from the parking lot, would be shielded. So currently, the parking lot faces our house, so all of the lights from the cars and essentially the glare from the whole school, face directly into our windows. The trees have not been successful, and so we think that a board fence, similar to what they have along the side of the school, it's not a 6-foot fence, but it's a lower fence. I didn't actually go over and measure it, but I think it's probably around 4.5, 5 feet, would shield the headlights so they won't be shining into our windows. And then the only other requirement, or I guess request, would be that the board fence isn't planted right adjacent directly to the sidewalk, that it's set back a little bit so that there can be some landscaping in front of the fence to soften the fence along the sidewalk. But I haven't seen any of the specific plans that Mr. Verma has maybe presented to you, so we're in the dark a bit about that.
So it looks like the fence is right in the middle between the parking lot.
That's good.
Between the parking lot and the street sidewalk.
Yes.
And I think you're right about maybe a 4 or 5 foot fence, but I figured that because we're taking out vegetation, we could do what we did at Bent's, maybe a 4 or 5 foot fence with a lattice on top, and then maybe they could plant some vines, some wisteria or something. I don't know how you all feel about
There's already a couple
that.
of different fences at this property. I think it would be a little incongruous aesthetically to introduce yet a third.
Oh, okay.
But
What I was going to actually suggest, and I didn't know if Jenny, what she would think about this, is actually on the to the right side property, running right along where it's almost indistinguishable whose property it's on. There's a cedar fence, and I was thinking if we did so, if we actually put it on the parking lot edge, set it all the way back on the island, you'd have all the vegetation in the front, and you'd have a cedar fence in the front, which would just gray and fade out and essentially disappear, and do it at a 4-foot height. So
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, all of their fences are vinyl, so I don't
that's
know.
why, yeah, I don't love the
they would
vinyl fence, yeah.
I think a vinyl fence would be fine, honestly. But yeah, I mean, they could plant, initially they had, if you remember, and Maggie knows this well, the planting plan had a ton of very small pots of vegetation, so they could reintroduce those. And I think the idea would be to have the fence go, as you're looking at the building, to the left side of the front walk, and then a couple of panels to the right side. And then the existing landscape of rocks and mature trees would cover the rest of it. But again, I don't know what they're planning.
Yeah,
Right.
so, I mean, what they sent over, there wasn't a big plan. It just was, they took their original landscape plan and just drew a red line right across the left planting bed as you're looking at the school on the left.
can Tim or Cheyenne bring that up on the screen?
So I was,
Yeah.
So I was over there as well, and it's just unfortunate that it looks that way, and I'm not 100% sure that the trees are dead because of ledge. In this particular time frame, we've had the driest weather, and there's no irrigation out there. And if you see what plants are doing well, it's the ornamental grass and some of the lavender, and those plants can do survive in dry conditions. So the mountain laurel that were planted, it's a woodland plant, it's native, it's just full sun. So they're kind of struggling a little bit, and the birches are kind of struggling. So I just think it's dryness, not necessarily ledge. And
Maggie, a question on that. So would it be, without irrigation, would it be difficult to, if they planted new, just to water them with a hose or something like that? Or those bags that you can put on trees?
yeah, so, usually in the fall is a great time for planting. So I'm not sure what their planting schedule plan was. It's the needs of plants are less at this time of the year because they're going dormant. So they could just go up, bring a hose out there and water for the next week or two after planting, and then they should take. But as Jenny mentioned, Helen mentioned, the original plan did talk about a berm. And so when I went out there and met with Mrs. McGetrick, I asked about the berm. Because on the right side of the building, as you're looking, if you look at it, there are rock outcroppings and it's kind of a natural setting.
Right.
And so when we talked, it was supposed to sort of be the same on the left side, but Mrs. McGetrick pointed out that actually in the final plan, berm didn't make the final landscape plan. So that's why when they installed it, they didn't do a berm. And I think a berm would have been helpful if there was ledge, because then you're adding, more soil, which would allow the roots to grow. So I think it's a little bit unfortunate. And the applicant didn't seem willing to create a berm, which I think would have been a little bit nicer. So what also we noticed when we were there, if you look at the left side planting along Columbine Road, they planted the correct size material as was stated in the plan. They planted the 5-gallon mountain laurels, and in the front, they did not plant the correct size plant material as was noted on the landscape plan originally. And the original landscape plan had 5-gallon lavender, which I expressed that nobody grows 5-gallon lavender, so that would be very difficult to source. And sure enough, everything was undersized. So when I met Mrs. McGetrick out there, we came up with a plan it didn't make sense to make the applicant dig out the undersized material. We were just gonna add more to it. So they agreed to adding 1 more fir tree, and they agreed to adding 6 more hydrangea bushes, which grow fast and would fill in, and they're native. So when I went out there to check it out, they did plant the original 3 firs and then the 1 extra, but they never planted the hydrangeas. So
They were limelight, you said
yeah, they were
limelight?
limelight because they can get 10 or 12 feet tall fairly quickly.
And how many of those, what did you say? 6
They were
of
supposed to
those.
be 6.
Maggie, I think what we heard from Sunny was that corporate would not approve whatever that means, would not approve of hydrangeas.
So I have like an email from Mrs. McGetrick and I, kind of agreeing to the plan. So I didn't hear back that it wasn't accepted. So I'm not familiar with that.
Cheyenne, can you scroll up just a little bit, because
Meredith, I was going to suggest in the absence of the applicant that's actually asking for this minor amendment, that maybe we table this discussion until Marianne gets here.
okay. I was just thinking we could
it's up
utilize
to
the
you
time.
all. I just think there's a lot of discussion going around that they're
Well,
not
this is
privy
just
to.
sort of a background, so I think when Marion shows up, we will at least have had a chance to think about this. Could you just, Cheyenne, just scroll up just a bit to, yeah, all right, so that's it. And so this, it looks like it's incomplete.
So just to be clear,
Sorry,
Maggie, from what you're saying, I recall the meeting where we all agreed that you would be the board liaison with Marion and the applicant, Sunny, to get the landscape plan, modifications that we might need because of things being difficult to get or what have you. So, but we all expected that there would be a robust landscaping installation. I mean, that's what we all talked about. So are you saying they didn't provide us with that robust landscaping plan ever, really? And now it's just coming kind of back because of the how noticeable the dead trees. I mean, they're very noticeable. I just think I messaged Meredith when I noticed it too, just because it's very noticeable. But I mean, I still think it's an issue beyond the dead trees if they didn't install the robust landscape plan that we all approved.
Yeah, so I think that is the plan. I mean, the problem.
Okay.
It's a big mulch bed, not a planting bed. And I know things take time, and that's why we sort of agreed on limelight hydrangeas, because they are such fast growers. Mountain laurels are so slow, they're not going to get very quick, very fast, very quickly. So we were trying to work and come up with a plan. And so, you know, we agreed to it. So I was a little surprised that it wasn't there.
What you agreed to with Marion didn't actually get installed.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maggie, do you think those pine trees would grow in a berm? The original pine trees?
Yeah. The first they should. They should be fine. I mean, they probably would grow a little bit more slowly. They just need a little bit more care. It's along Central Ave. It's fairly busy. You know, then it has the sidewalk. So, and then it has a parking lot. So it's not an ideal planting bed just because there's a lot of heat and a lot of sun. But, you know, water and more, a deeper
So I'm thinking more soil,
compost,
right?
more soil around it would be helpful.
So I'm thinking in the winter with the hydrangeas, they lose their leaves, right? So this light's gonna go right through and hit the neighbor's house regardless.
You know,
Prevents.
you know, a couple of opinions. It was noted on this plan that there is ledge, right? When you look at the note at the top of this particular sheet, there's an acknowledgement that the trees and shrubs in that particular location need to be planted to avoid, you know, the existing rock and ledge. And when a planting plan is established and agreed upon, the burden for irrigating is the applicant's burden. You know, we should never accept from any applicant that, well, we didn't put an irrigation system in and it became dry and the trees died. You know, if the applicant decides, any applicant, this is my opinion, any applicant submits a planting plan and they don't put in an irrigation system, it's their burden to water, to make sure that the planting plan that they submit succeeds. We shouldn't have to accept, you know, on behalf of any resident, that, gee, it got dry and the plants died. So we want an alternative that doesn't depend on water. And I guess furthermore, rock is removed consistently for a variety of reasons. And if we have a planting plan that's impacted by the presence of ledge, take the ledge out. But this idea that, you know, any neighbor can't have what was aesthetically submitted and accepted, I think is unfair.
I think, Sean, may I just quickly jump in on that? It's one of the main things that we have some jurisdiction over on site plan approval on a Dover Amendment protected use. It's the planting and the buffer, you know, to the impact. So this is why I think this keeps coming back as a concern to us. So I just want to reinforce what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, I don't think any of the neighbors should have to make a concession, you know, for the reasons that I stated. And I guess my last question, Maggie, is what's the order of magnitude cost of these two trees?
So there'd be 4 trees, and I understand if they want to, if the Russells want a fence, I do understand that that's probably could be beneficial to them, and it would be a cost to the applicant. So if the fence goes in somewhere, and I'm not sure if I would recommend putting it right where they suggested, because it doesn't tie into any it's just a freestanding wall. So I would have probably moved it back closer to the parking lot. But if they did a fence and spent some money on a fence, maybe some smaller trees, evergreens, would be a good trade-off. So there are still some evergreens to soften looking at the fence, and there's evergreens for the winter, and they can slowly get taller. But and
Like
even
a green giant that would grow into
yeah.
a larger tree quickly, but
Yeah.
start smaller, so it would
Yeah, so
take.
green giant arborvitae, once established, it grows 3 feet a year. And so maybe they could, if they do a fence, maybe they start with a 5-foot tree instead of a 10-foot tree. So you're kind of working with the applicant, but I still think they need more plant material. I still think they should plant 6 more hydrangeas. It's just a very big. It's very big. It's a very big planting bed.
It's very sparse.
And it's
terrible,
super
actually.
sparse.
Yes, and I just want to add, our preference
You're
really
saying
would
that
be to
plants were
have
shown
a
on the planting plan.
robustly landscaped, space that had a watering system. And I think at this point, our concession is, okay, yeah, put a fence in because it doesn't require any maintenance. But I think that, thank you for mentioning that it's the applicant's responsibility to water the plants that they put in and to have a system for that. I appreciate that.
It's their responsibility, or it becomes their burden to hand water. It's not reasonable to present a planning plan and not have also a plan to irrigate it. So if there is no automatic irrigation system in there, it becomes the burden of whomever it is to water it in a different way.
I mean, and right now, we know that the plants aren't going to survive, so this is a perfect opportunity to bring more soil in. It's not that expensive to build up a berm and then plant the green giants in enough soil so that they will survive. If you have more soil, you'll have to water them less.
Yeah.
Maybe we do a little bit of both. Fence, more soil, and I guess 3 things, and the vegetation.
But to the applicant,
Meredith, the board is really going pretty far down this road without the applicant having a chance to hear
Yes,
any of this
so
input or respond to any of it.
That's what I just wanted to, just so everyone's caught up now. I think we can pause this. Sorry, Jenny, and Helen, that this,
That's okay.
moving this up,
It makes
Mary
sense.
didn't know. So why don't we just put a hold on this until the applicant does come, and we can move to our site plan approval discussion, because I think there's some good, I'd like to make some good progress on this tonight, if we can. Cheyenne, if you could pull up sort of the framework draft.
Yes, one moment.
I sent to Cheyenne, Tim, and you, Meredith, quite a few edits to that. I don't know if you want to.
Are those
share
the red
that.
lines? I think they're added in there.
They should be, but it would be added. I use.
It would be added, yes.
No, we didn't add any of Cheryl's things. It's a separate document if you want to look at it.
It's a separate
Oh, I'm
document.
sorry. Yeah, we should incorporate that. I thought it was the red, what was
mine.
in red. Oh, those were yours. It was great. I loved it. So I thought it was Cheryl's because.
I didn't recall if we agreed to incorporate them into the main document, and I had already started
Okay.
working on some edits a while ago, so I
Okay.
just kept it in a separate document.
Okay.
But if you want to start with what Tim did with Maggie's edits, then go to mine.
no, and I didn't really have edits. I was just adding, and Tim probably was not too excited when he walked in today and saw everything that I added. So I apologize, Tim, for that.
Why don't we then pull up the framework that Tim has, your edits, and sort of what I had, but let's look at Cheryl's if we could cross comparison, and maybe we just start with the purpose and we go through section by section.
Okay.
And
Sorry, just to confirm, we want the original one, or do we want the one that Cheryl sent at 4 o'clock?
if we could put
Just
the
so I have-
one that's on the website, the framework with Maggie's updates and my updates, but then go through and maybe we can add Cheryl's
So-
sections. Or are yours just language edits?
Mine are language edits, but I don't know if I have what Tim had in the box, I think. So I'm not sure
Okay.
I have your edits in my version, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'm just not sure about that.
All right. So why don't let's start, we can start with purpose
Mhm.
under number 1. And there is an edit on this in blue at the bottom. Let's see what they're doing. Oh, the district.
It said guest user, but I don't know who the guest user was.
Okay. So the purpose in the framework that Tim had, and this is what is actually currently in our site plan
Yeah, so this-
approval bylaw, ends with permitted in the district. And I was good with all of that. And we're not voting on this tonight, so we can,
So,
just sort of move through.
I'm sorry, the one that this shows more, these rules. So you're saying at the end of district, but there was more to that,
Yeah,
right?
these rules and regulations are adopted for the purpose of establishing uniform procedures and requirements.
No,
for
this is-
Submissions to the site plan approval. You know what, we are just starting and Marion just got here. So should we let Marion just come and we'll just finish what we were doing there? So
Okay.
we moved up a few items on the agenda and I'm sorry because you didn't know that we were moving them up, but we started to begin the discussion on 193 Central Ave and we can continue that if you'd like at this time. Is that okay?
I was in a Zoom hearing at home, so I didn't
Okay.
see Tim's message.
That's all right. No, it's our fault.
Left it
We
anyway,
should-
so.
No, that's our apologies for moving.
That's all right. This is
Moving
great.
things up. So Cheyenne, if we could go back to that plan one more time and just pick up where we left off. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, thank you, guys. All right. So Marion, when we were just giving a brief discussion, it was sort of an update on how did we get to the point where we are right now, and just so the issue with the trees and how we're trying to resolve it with a fence, and possibly some additional plant material, and move forward with a solution.
I think the applicant, and Sonny isn't here tonight, it's his wife's birthday. If I absolutely have to get him, I have a telephone number, but I think we can discuss this without him being here because his approach at this point is to say to the planning board, first of all, would you approve the idea of putting a fence up, which is now what the neighbor is asking for? And then if so, how high should the fence be? And then, how far back should it be? So those are, if you can give advice tonight about that, that would be great. You can see the red line on the drawing. That's what he was thinking of as the location, which leaves the possibility of, the problem with that front area, as we've seen from the planting of the 3 trees, is that, first of all, if I'd known they had to take out ledge to do those trees, I probably would have brought it back to the planning board right away. Because having worked with the animal shelter over in that access road, the ledge removal is enormous that has to be done in order to produce a surface that's deep enough so that you can plant something and have it do well. So anyway, the trees didn't do well, and planting more trees won't do well either. So I think a fence is a good solution, and there may be some shallow-rooted plants that would do fine on the surface, whether it's, in both places. There's still some plants behind there, but it's basically fairly bare looking because it just hasn't done well, that particular area. So I think if you could sort of divide up your discussion, first of all, is the fence idea one that the planning board would accept? And that would be the same fence that you see, I think it's gray, around the rest of the property. And I was thinking about height. When I think about fences, I think I'm 5 feet tall. So if a fence is 5 feet tall, I can't really see over it. That's pretty high for this location. I mean, if the planning board wants it to be that high, it can be. If it were 4 feet tall, then you'd still be able to see over it. But the purpose of the fence is to block car lights as they come out of the parking area. And it's also to block the view of the neighbor of the front of the building where there's parking. Not the whole building, you can still see the building because it's going to be higher. But right now, that neighbor has the most direct view looking straight into the parking area in front of the building. So we need advice about height. We need to know whether the planning board will endorse this idea of putting a fence up instead of these 3 trees. And then if you wanted to discuss further or provide further advice about landscaping around the fence, anytime is fine. It's kind of late to put in landscaping now anyway. But we do need to think, I think he could get his contractor to come within a few weeks. Who knows what the weather's going to be like? It's possible that a contractor could still put the fence in, but it's going to take probably 3 or 4 weeks to get that, just to get the contractor to come. That's what he told me. That's why I'm asking you tonight whether you'd give us the go-ahead on doing the fence and whether you are content with the midway point location for the fence, which gives you the option of doing some more plantings in front if you can get something to grow, or even just flowers or something, you know. And then it leaves room in the back so that if you're plowing the parking lot, snow can still push over on that edge. Any thoughts and ideas on that? If you can't decide tonight, it's okay.
We were
but-
amenable to a fence. Certainly, we were thinking, I think, lower than 5 feet,
Yeah.
more of like a 4 feet. But we were also thinking if we did support a fence, moving it further towards the parking lot,
Yeah,
maybe just within the grasses or.
Yeah, so in that planting bed, there are 2 light fixtures.
yeah.
And so the bottom, the black light fixtures sit on a concrete base,
Mhm.
which isn't super attractive looking.
Yeah.
So if a fence was going to go there, maybe I would do the fence just on the other side of the.
On the street
on
side.
the Central Ave side.
Yeah.
So the bottom concrete bases aren't seen
Mhm.
by the neighbors. And at least the fence would sort of be anchored by the light fixtures, because it's kind of random. Just putting a fence randomly, that it doesn't line up to anything, doesn't line up to any fence on either side. And that's another question I have, which is a little off topic, but on the left side, it seems like they've added another fence. Like it's a
You mean that
black
metal fence?
Yeah, it's
That's a
black.
requirement of the, that's a requirement for a school, a preschool, in order that, and we went through all this with the building inspector and everything. It's so that if somebody loses control of their car at the side of Columbine Road, they'll have a barrier, and they didn't regard the inside fence as an adequate barrier. They wanted that outside metal fence. So that's why there are 2 fences.
Oh, that's a little, yeah, because it looks a little odd.
It's like, it's sort of a building code requirement, but it's particularly applicable to a school where there's a playground outside. So if a car went astray, it's possible that it could go right into a bunch of kids in a playground if the other fence isn't adequate to protect them.
But they don't have that, like at the Tucker School, do they? Never heard that requirement, but.
Well, they have a fence.
If they
They
may-
have a fence at Tucker.
The original fence at,
The problem was that the fence that was there was not considered adequate. I don't know whether you could have done a chain link fence instead of the fence that they
yeah,
did
but
do.
it sits on a stone retaining wall, which I would
Well,
have,
the stone retaining wall was part of the original.
yeah, so I
plan.
would have thought that stone retaining wall, which the
Oh,
fence sits on top,
I
would have
agree.
been adequate to stop a car.
I completely agree.
But anyway.
I
that's
can tell you because I
ridiculous.
remember this going back and forth and back and
Yeah,
forth.
but it just.
Not with you, with the building inspector and with whoever, promulgates these regulations.
So just the point is, there's a mix of fences at this.
Sure.
Which,
That's my point, right?
and so that's why adding another section of fence in a location where it's just going to look a little bit, it's just going to look odd.
It's gonna look odd anyway, because like the natural landscape on the other side looks nice.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like,
Well,
you can come over and get some rock from my property and move it over there and just have it be a bit more natural and put some shrubs and it would look better. I'm concerned that the aesthetics of it, honestly, but
Well, I mean, you could eventually, I know where there are plenty of rocks at the moment, but you could put just a few boulders in an irregular way in front. It's not a huge length, but maybe a couple at least. And then you could plant something that doesn't have to go down 4 feet or 5 feet like a tree. And I think it would probably do fine. I mean, there is some soil on the surface. It wasn't just bare.
Yeah, and if, as I was saying, remember we had gone out and we had met and, I brought up a email, summarizing when we met. And I'll read that. My understanding is the plan included the creation of a berm on the left side of Central Ave that would match what is already existing on the right side, and the berm was not installed. And then you had said to me that the berm never actually made the final landscape plan that was approved.
That was taken out, I think.
Yeah, so it was taken out for whatever reason. But we talked about that adding a berm there. You could set some boulders in it that would create a more natural landscape, because this is, I said, that's what's lacking on the left side of the bed. It's totally flat. And the two sides of the planting bed are vastly dissimilar, and it's not a cohesive landscape.
Right.
So I said the creation and planting of a berm would create more privacy for the neighbors and would create a more interesting landscape. And I said, additionally, the plants that had been installed don't match the size of the plants approved on the plan. There's a vast difference in the size of material planted along Columbine Road versus what is planted on Central Ave, in particular the Mount Laurels and the firs. And so that landscape on Columbine is thriving, looks really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I said, since the undersized material had already been purchased, I think planting of a few more additional plants would be a good alternative than to having the applicant replace all the undersized material. So he had to plant 3 additional firs, so we agreed to plant 4. And then we also agreed to plant 6 limelight hydrangeas in a 5-gallon size. And I said, and I went out and I, spray painted where the plant material should go. But I also think, obviously if they ran into any ledge problems, they could have moved it. And it's supposed to be natural, so it didn't have to be totally perfect. So when I went out there to check it out, I noticed that the limelight hydrangeas weren't planted. So they're not planted.
Were they supposed to be right next to the trees or further back?
That was sort of just to fill in. It was all, kind of staggered just to fill in any of the gaps.
Now, if you're talking about a fence, though, you like the idea. I like the hydrangeas myself. What you're saying is that you'd still like to see those planted at an appropriate distance, but outside or inside? I think we could do it. It would work outside, do you think, with this ledge? Or?
Yeah.
You think it would? Yeah. Anyway, it would be in the spring.
If you took out those 4 big trees, that what would be acceptable would be to do something small, like a 5 or 6 foot green giant, which would be it would be a much smaller root system and much more likely to grow.
If we brought in more dirt. I think if we made an effort to build a little bit of a berm, those green giants would survive.
Well, so do you want to do that instead of a fence? Is that what you're saying?
I actually want to do both, but I don't know how far I can push it.
We can't do the trees now because it's too late. So you have a neighbor now, and I understand what you're trying to do. You want to make it nice, make it look good. The neighbor's going to have to look at, nothing because the trees all died. So I'm not saying that it's crazy. I mean, she's just wants to find a solution.
It's too late to plant.
Yeah, we're still planting. We plant all the way up to the second week in December, if
Well,
possible.
you got to, I know, but you have to get your contract to get the person to come. You don't call them. I can't promise that it could happen next week. That's what I'm saying. Because we don't have a contract with somebody. I don't do it anyway, but I'm worried about it now because.
I think it should be whatever the neighbor wants.
Okay.
If they feel the need for a fence, I would suggest, putting it, as Meredith said, a 4-foot fence on the outside of the the, on the lampposts so they don't see the base.
Yep,
And
okay.
then plant everything on the Central Ave side. So I don't think we necessarily care what the view is from the Goddard School out. That's not really our concern.
Sure.
It's more from what the neighbors. So even if they took some of their ornamental grasses that are in a straight line along their, the parking lot, they could just transplant them randomly throughout the planting bed.
But they're also not expensive, are they, to buy?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
But I
know
think
about the
it's a
time.
trade-off. I think it is the size of the plantings is going to something much smaller is much less expensive.
Yeah.
That would offset. So I think a fence, it's not unreasonable to ask for
No.
some,
Yeah.
4 green giants to be placed and some hydrangeas.
But why the green giants? I just,
Smaller, because they grow quickly.
So most,
I'm very
most-
hesitant to recommend a tree of any sort
Yeah.
after what's happened twice now.
So if you also
So
look, they
expensive.
do have some of their other evergreens are doing well. Like the one on the right side of the planting bed is doing well. So the problem is when you have larger evergreens like firs and pines, their root balls are mostly clay. They're all
So what do you mean
they're
by
all-
other evergreens?
so all the evergreens.
Hydrangeas? I mean, no,
Yeah, like firs. The evergreens are firs or pines.
right.
So they're all grown a little bit further south in soils that are dense clay.
Yeah.
And so you have to water them really, really well or add a lot of compost around it to promote new root growth to grow outside the clay root ball. So green giants, sometimes you can find them grown in a pot or they're grown more north, so they're used to our soil, so it's not as dense clay. So I think part of the problem they ran into was not just ledge, maybe there was some ledge, but as you said, they excavated some ledge, was just they dried out. We're in a very, very dry period of time, and everything is.
I understand. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we thought the problem actually could have been overwatering originally. There's a sprinkler system all around this site.
There is
And
in that front bed because I didn't see any.
Well, he said that, that's what he told me back in the beginning, that we have the ability to water whatever we plant there. And so I agree, it was surprising to me that things did so poorly there. But he did tell me that in order to do anything at all in that location, and maybe he should have moved it, I think, Sonny Verma is doing a very good job running this school, is doing very well. He runs schools. He's not a landscaper, and I know, we've received the recommendation other times, why don't you just get a real landscape designer out there? But, every day he's dealing with the administrative issues at the school. So we would really like to give him a pretty, a step-by-step way of proceeding and not, so I think, number one, if the neighbor says, yes, I do want the fence, 4-foot-high fence is what the planning board's recommending. And the location that you're recommending, and I like the way you described it because I can make it specific, is that where the light supports are, the fence should be located outside that area towards Central Ave, but not too far outside because the idea is to hide those cement bases. So that's fence. Then the question is, well, the reason he asked about height was he said, I know the planning board will be concerned about how this looks from Central Ave. The idea is it going to look nice or is it going to look not very nice? So I think landscaping is the answer to making it look nicer. Mm-hmm. And the specific landscaping, I think if they can get the fence in before maybe we get bad weather, winter weather, that would be a good thing because that would block some of the view for the neighbor. I think the landscaping may or may not be possible to be determined yet. I'd be happy to come back with an actual plan showing, and I understand what you're telling me, and tell me more if you have more advice, with a plan for you so you can see that this is what we think would look nice, and how do you feel about it, planning board? I can send it to you. You don't even have to have a meeting. You can send it around. You can give the comments back to the planning director. Whatever's easier for you, because you have a lot of other things on your plate, so. Well,
Marion, we had a pretty, and it was unfortunate, we get into this discussion prior to your arrival,
Mm-hmm.
and you can play the tape. You'll hear what we had to say. But to be fair to you, I think it's only responsible for me to express the point of view I expressed earlier. And while I think it's great that the applicant is an operator of a school and he's doing very well operating the school, I also feel it's his responsibility to meet the expectation of what was presented and accepted, in terms of planting. So I think what we'll come up with is something that, whatever the challenges are earlier, it was thought that there wasn't an irrigation system. So, we were
I'll check on that.
Yeah, we were discussing that, and I it was, in my opinion, was, Marion, and I want to make sure I restate it since you weren't here to hear it earlier. If an applicant doesn't put an irrigation system in, it's his burden to irrigate whatever he plants.
Sure, but
whatever way it happens. So, again, I don't want something to have been said earlier and have you not have the opportunity to hear it, and I don't want you to have to go listen to the tape. But I also feel the neighbor, Jenny, who spoke earlier, the fence was something she was conceding. She was accepting a fence because she couldn't get plants, or at least that was her interpretation.
Sure.
We don't want any resident to concede because we haven't tried hard enough to accomplish what was presented and expected. So, my point of view is I'm hopeful if the applicant wants to provide the neighbor both the fence and planting, I think the planting is something we should figure out how to do. I've had my own experience with Green Giants. They're fabulous. They're unbelievable. So if Green Giants are the most appropriate to go in there, then great.
Well, is the purpose of the planting to be attractive or to block the view?
Probably both.
Because I think Green Giants are pretty unattractive. Sorry. We plant them all over the place. I have so many developers that plant them. And I'm not criticizing your recommendation because you're right. They grow fast and the little ones get bigger and they're nice and full.
It's a great screen.
And maybe
if the intent is to create screening, it is probably the
and
most
if
ideal.
That's why the hydrangeas mixed in with it would soften.
Yeah.
And if they were planted closer to the fence, they would be a backdrop when the Russells look out.
I would think it would be really nice to have,
and then the birches are in front, and then the hydrangeas could be in front of the birches, so it's a layered look.
right, okay. I'm making a little diagram. That's why I want to really understand. So I know the birches are there. They're in the front. And then you could have
Sort of in the
hydrangeas
middle.
or other plants, or a mixture maybe. Still maybe a fence. Because the fence is the thing that would probably go in now.
Right.
And we want to leave space for the landscaping. And if some of it could go in now, fine. I mean, I did plant grass in my front yard and it's growing, but I think we're just lucky because we've had warm weather. So, I mean, I can certainly take from this meeting for Sunny to go back and talk to Jenny Russell again. I do feel pretty convinced that, any larger trees are gonna have trouble after what happened.
Do you know the
What do
length
you
of
think?
fence that we're talking about here?
I can get an estimate. That's where it would be.
Because I wonder whether if you do some kind of staggering of the sections, so it doesn't look so odd, you can have it come a little bit forward and this one comes back. I mean, not too random, but like every other.
I understand what you're saying. So like this, right? I don't know how many lengths of fence we're talking about, but I probably am I will at least have to give you back a plan showing you, because this is so vague, showing you that type if you think that's a good idea.
It depending upon the plant materials, you might get something growing in between the sections. So it just doesn't look like this weird thing there.
All right.
If the parking spaces are 9-foot spaces, that's probably 30 feet of fence.
Oh, yeah, so you definitely have room
Yeah.
to do that.
I wasn't paying attention. I think that looks
So
great.
what's an average section of fence, do you think?
8 feet.
8 feet?
Yeah. And,
Oh,
and
sure.
from a
Yeah.
standpoint of like weather and time, if that's what it is, he's got 5 post holes. I mean, he can get it done, whoever it is.
Oh, yeah, he thinks he can, he does, he thinks too. I mean, he even thinks we never have really that bitter cold
Right.
weather that it gets frozen down that
Correct.
deep. So he thinks that he can do the fence sections and talk to his fence, the same person that installed the other fence. And I don't know why you couldn't do what you're talking about, because the idea here isn't to keep people from escaping or something. You know,
Right.
it's just to provide a visual barrier, and the idea is to make it more interesting.
It'd be
to look
nice
at.
to have 4 pieces, so it's not just 1 forward and 2 back. You know, if 8
5, odd
or-
numbers.
or 5, yeah.
4 times, if they're 8-foot
Yeah.
pieces of
I'm
32
just
feet.
looking at this, as Sean says, our parking space requirement's 9 feet, so there's 4-ish spaces probably within that.
So as many as can fit in there, either
Yeah.
4 or 5 pieces.
Right.
Should we do a section on the other side of the sidewalk as well? Meaning the blue hash marks, because when I was there were 2 dead trees on that side.
Other side of the sidewalk, you mean on the other side of the
Sorry,
driveway?
walkway. See the blue hash mark,
There's a
the blue
walkway?
squiggly?
You'll have to show me, do you mind? Yeah.
I'm calling this a sidewalk, maybe it's a walkway.
It is a walkway.
So I know there's dead trees here, so would we put some fencing there as well? Because I think we're gonna have the same problem with light hitting the Russell's house.
Well, I think the fence should be as long as it needs to be to effectively block what we're talking about, which is, but it is, yeah, it's cars moving around after dark, and the place does close at 6, but at this time of year, it's dark, so
Yeah.
it's dark at 4 o'clock.
I mean, I think
4:30.
it just, like aesthetically, that is gonna make it look even more odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too, with the rocks that are there and
Yeah.
the big
Yeah,
trees.
there's already a lot of Columbine-type rocks, right? Isn't that why we didn't do a lot of change over there?
I don't remember seeing rock right on that
It's
side of the
pretty
fence, but if
tight
it's
to the-
there, it's there. Yeah, it's all good.
Tight to the parking lot.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly, like right
But
there where
this
it's
is-
flat,
Yeah, but
could have the same problem.
this
But
is
that's
very
okay.
natural look in here, though.
Okay.
This,
I think it would be.
A little odd
would
'cause it's the other side of the
solve a problem,
sidewalk.
But I think it
Yeah.
might just look a little bit weird.
No worries, just don't want to miss an opportunity to put more fence in.
And the only other thing we talked about, was she here, was the cedar fence.
I had mentioned that cedar, there is a cedar where Tino's, between Tito's property and.
Yeah, it's a different
Goddard
style of
School.
fence.
It is, it's a cedar, that's a cedar, and I was thinking cedar really disappears, it grays and it almost, and it's more natural. I don't love vinyl fences, but,
No, I know. Well, it's just, the reason this was proposed is because that's where it is, that's what's around the other
and it sounds
side.
like Jenny's, okay, I mean, it's, again, and Helen, what they would want.
A natural cedar that would just weather. It's not that it's, I don't know that it makes a difference. I mean, I think it probably could be done either way. I'm not an expert on
It
this,
sort of
but
disappears.
yeah.
I think actually the fence should, I think to make it look more consistent, it could match the fence on the side of the school that's lower. And I don't know what the height of that is, so I don't want to say for sure it's 4 feet, but there is a lower fence that runs along the side of the school, closest to the school, and it's a gray vinyl. It's not horrible. I mean, I wouldn't put it up, but it, at least it would be consistent with what's there. And I think the combination of fencing and more landscaping would really be ideal.
Okay. So I'm not sure which fence that is, because you said there's 2 now on the other side.
She meant the vinyl, the gray vinyl.
Yeah, so
one, not
do
the
use a
wood.
matching fence,
Yeah.
but add landscaping to, I mean,
So, yeah, to
try
soften
to
it.
design it in a better way. Well, that's pretty helpful, actually.
Just pulling out and I think pulling out those, you've already got your holes dug
Yep.
from where the 4 dead trees are, so popping in something evergreen and smaller, like a,
Right, because
Maggie.
those trees further to the right towards Central Ave?
yeah, they're
The
all
dead,
along
the dead
front.
holes, you know,
Yeah,
the
they're all
remaining
along the
holes.
front.
They are. Okay, so they'll be available to put something in, right? And put some soil in around them?
And you could probably get a good deal.
Yeah, probably.
People are putting things on sale.
And I just want to add, I think they're the only things on the property that haven't done well. So
Yeah,
I would just confirm, Marion, that there is a watering system in place
Yep.
because the side along Columbine and the back all have done, we don't see any dead trees there. So I don't know why those trees in that front section didn't grow. I'm not convinced there's a watering system, but again, it has been very dry, so.
Well, I know, but I will definitely check on that because I certainly understood from before that there was. So if there isn't, then they do need to put something in there.
That's great.
So I've got a few elements here. 4-foot high fence, I guess would be the same material as the fence along Columbine Road. It will be between Central Ave. It will be just outside the light post bases towards Central Ave. That leaves the holes that are there for the trees that all died available for other types of landscaping if possible. That could be put in now if we can find something. But certainly that would be where it would be put. And I will check on irrigation, but I do understand, I agree with you that the responsibility of the owner is to irrigate one way or the other. There's no point in planting if you don't irrigate. And so I'll confirm. And it's, I'll certainly get back to you on that point. I want to let you know. If
Right.
it's not in there, it'll have to be somehow put in, so. So that's a lot of information. And that's why I'm here tonight, because
Great, thank you.
it was so vague. I didn't know exactly how to proceed. I couldn't give you a plan. Normally I would try to do that, but I think it's better to get the advice first. Because
That's
some of
great.
your ideas have been interesting and they're very specific too as to location. And Jenny, you're still there, right?
Yes, Helen.
She's actually
Yeah, it's Helen.
Oh, Helen, I'm sorry. So,
That's okay.
I mean, I want, to sketch out what advice has been provided tonight. And then I really would like Sunny to put in place a more specific plan and review it with you to make sure that it's what you are expecting. And I want to get moving on it quickly because of the weather and everything. So are you going to be around in the next week or two? Are you going to go away for Thanksgiving or?
We're here.
You'll be there.
We're here until mid-January, so it'd be great to use that as a deadline.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. Okay, well, unless there's a lot more, if there's more you want to tell me, I'm happy to listen. Otherwise, this is really what I was hoping to get, lots of advice. No, and specific advice. This is much more specific, and I think you'll be able to work on this. The one thing I will get back to you on is the irrigation. I'll just let you know there was never irrigation there. That would be a surprise, but.
And Marion, do note to Sunny what Cheryl had indicated.
Yeah, the staggered,
sections or
I've got that down here.
segments.
Staggered fencing, maybe 4 or 5 sections of fencing. The location, Maggie has described that very specifically. Suggestions for planting, hydrangea, and maybe the arborvitae, if there's a way to do it that's attractive.
Or a white pine.
Or
You know,
even pine.
You can do white pine.
Yeah.
They're native.
Yeah.
I think that having it look natural with some variety in height and layers is, like you suggested, I think it's important.
Yep.
Because otherwise it'll look out of sync and out of character with what's on the other side of the sidewalk.
Okay,
So,
that's good. That's good, thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Marion, for all of this. The only thing that I would add is if you're thinking about doing a staggered fence, is to make sure there aren't any gaps. So you really have to use more, linear board feet of fence, because really what we're trying to avoid is all of the lights, from the cars coming in and out. And if there's
Sure.
gaps in the fence, it sort of defeats the purpose. And I think it's really short. I sent Sunny an email some months ago. I think it's about 4 sections of fence.
Okay.
So it isn't, I think, a big outlay.
No,
But to be able to soften it with landscaping would be great. And thank you, Planning Board, for all of your attention to this. It has gone on for a long time.
Thank you for your patience.
okay,
All right, great.
thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Marion.
Sorry I missed you initially, but
No, that's all right. All worked out.
thanks for going over it again.
So now we can reopen our 0 Blue Hill Ave, parcel 57-5, site plan approval continued from October 24th. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to try and take control. If Cheyenne or Tim will allow it.
Chris, are you in the, I got to promote you to panelist, and then you should be able to,
He is just promoted.
you should be able to go there.
Yep, it looks like I'm getting there. Okay. A little delayed, but it should be okay. So I just threw together a few slides just to kind of catch us up on, 5 or 6 weeks ago, the comments, all the renderings, all of that, and then we can discuss it.
Great, and if you could just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Chris Fazenden. I'm with Viking Development, the applicant on this project. I'm part of the Gardner School team. So like I just said, objective, we'll recap a little bit. We have a new member that wasn't here last time, so we'll give you a little info.
Thank you.
And then we'll kind of run through kind of the high level, big topics that we received feedback and comments on. Recap, we're located between 665 Blue Hill Ave and 711 Blue Hill Ave. Total site area is about 6.87 acres, zoned RA residential. What we're proposing, 16,200 square foot building, just under 5,000 square foot playground, and we're now reduced our parking lot size to 45 spaces. Enrollment capacity, we're looking at 195 students and 32 staff at full capacity. Something that was brought up was kind of comparison to some of the other schools in the area. I pulled data for Goddard and Little Sprouts. Goddard is 16,800 square feet, 175 kids. Their age range is similar to ours, 8 weeks to 5 years. Little Sprouts just down the street from our site, a slightly smaller 2-story building, 9,900 square feet, 125 children, same age range, 8 weeks to 5 years old. Reminder, hours of operation, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, no weekends. And then we talked about it briefly before, drop off and pick up. We don't have a set schedule for that. It's really at the convenience of the parents and what fits their schedule. We've done parking studies that do show that it sort of follows what we would expect. 7:30 to 9 is peak drop off, and then 3:30 to 6 is kind of our peak pickup hours.
So can I just clip just for the public that's listening, you went from 57 parking spaces to 45?
Correct.
So, okay, so 12, a reduction of 12.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
So on that topic, site plan updates, we heard board feedback, neighbor feedback at the last meeting, kind of identified 6 things in all of those comments. I went back and watched the tape. Site layout and details, landscaping, lighting, architecture, drainage, and traffic. On the left are some comments I pulled. On the right kind of explain what you're looking at in the plans. Shifted the building and playground to the north 18 feet. We reduced parking count by 12 spaces, 57 down to 45. By shifting north 18 feet, we gained that 18 feet from the southern property line. So we got another, some more buffer there. We're now 77 feet from the southern property. In doing so, we limited or reduced our limit of disturbance by about 1/4 of an acre. We actually reduced our earthwork quantities down to 500 cubic yards of export. As requested, we prepared site sections, north, south, east, west, to kind of show our relation to the adjacent properties. We also prepared a rendering, kind of giving us the view from Route 138. We removed all vinyl fencing, provided a fencing spec sheet for the fence we are planning to use. I gave you some retaining wall details and some materials that we're looking to use. And then I provided a safety sheet on the artificial turf. I know there were some questions on that. So this is the site plan. We can kind of flip back to that if there's any questions. Same with the site sections here, showing our relationship to the adjacent properties. Earthwork cut fill diagram. Landscape, as I mentioned, we had done a tree survey for about 3.7 acres, which should cover kind of our disturbed area here. That identified 586 trees, 3-inch diameter and larger. 441 trees are being removed. That's reduced from when we were here last time. It was 471. 325 of those have been identified as an invasive species. 7 are classified as in poor condition or dead. I've identified average diameter of what's being removed at 8-inch and the median diameter at 5-inch. We're proposing 89 new trees, a slight increase from before when we were at 81. Most, I'd say 75% of them are proposed at 6 to 8 feet tall. And then the remaining are 12 to 14 feet tall. Those are mostly along the front elevation, along the retaining wall area. We've also kind of, those additional trees were mostly added to the adjacent shared property lines to kind of fill in any gaps of trees being removed due to grading retaining wall landscape.
Excuse me, I noticed that you have this projected up to 0 away, for me to get that up as well, or is
To join the Zoom?
Yeah.
You can join the Zoom via the town website under the calendar. So if you go to the home page and scroll down to the bottom, you should see a calendar.
Cheryl, if she's asking to actually see the materials, they're on the planning board website under
okay.
projects and proposals.
could you help me? Really like to have this as a,
As a document?
yeah, just put it on for here, so I'm on,
If you go, what Tim suggested is if you're on the home page, under boards and committees at the
planning
top.
board meeting materials, is
So
that?
that's to see this live, but if you want to see this as its own document.
Yeah, I actually,
Oh, so I
going to
don't
the
need
meeting
have it
materials
right
form is
now,
probably the
so
best way to do
If
it.
I can go in and get it
Yes,
later.
You can go and get it later by
Perfect.
going
I'm
to the
so
planning
sorry to
board.
interrupt.
oh, no problem, it's up there, yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Next one's lighting. There was a couple questions on lighting. Just thought I'd address it quickly. Still showing a photometric plan with 0 light trespass across property lines. And the plan is to be dark sky compliant. We've worked out a lighting timing plan. We'll be off from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. We've reduced pole heights from 18 down to 12, and then further refined locations with shields to make sure we're pointing inward. Architecture, we've incorporated a mansard roof design that really helped kind of bring the asphalt single roof line edge across our entire elevation, full extent of the building. We've replaced the brick water table along the bottom base of our building with a stone water table to help kind of fit the stone accents. We maintained the gabled roof design, figured that kind of helped tie to the residential feel. We looked at exterior finishes. We've decided to kind of stick with the combination of board and batten, lap siding, shingle siding as kind of contrasting elements to help bring it all together. I reviewed Goddard. Goddard's entire elevation is shingle siding. Little Sprouts is completely lap siding. So ours is kind of a mix of all of those elements together. Again, those are high quality finishes commonly used in residential construction. There was a comment at our last meeting about the height of the building. Height of the building is 22 feet. That's no taller than a typical 2-story residential building. And a portion of that 22 feet is actually sort of elevated to provide rooftop equipment screening.
Can I just stop you there for a minute? It's 22 feet from the new grade, which is 17 feet up from existing grade, right? Which is also up from sidewalk. So when we think about the height, I'm looking at this.
Yeah, if you're looking at it from the street, you're looking at a 14-foot retaining wall with 22 feet of building.
If I look at the section from the street, so we're not really looking at a 20-foot high building. But we can come back to that. I just wanted to mention that while you mentioned the height.
Sure. And then the last point on architecture, while we added those elements, try to get a residential feel to it, I also just want to point out that we did elements of retaining walls and landscaping and grading to try to help fit the building into the slope. The stone water table, for instance, from some angles isn't visible. So the stone retaining wall, the plantings kind of help hide some elements as well. Elevations, rendering. Drainage, these ones can be quick. You guys are probably aware it was in the packet. We received peer review comments on 10/21. The submittal included revised plans, updated drainage report, and a comment response letter as part of that. Last time there were some questions related to the implementation of the plan and intent to match that plan in construction. I spoke to the town engineer. I looked at some of the requirements. I just want to make it clear that there is a requirement for as-builts. There is a requirement for a certification by the engineer of record. We're required to put an operation and maintenance plan together where that requires inspections annually as well as after rainfall events. So all of that kind of contributes to ongoing maintenance and completion of what's designed and approved. And then traffic, we received comments back on that 10/29. As we sort of expected, they did make the recommendation for additional traffic counts. We were able to complete those yesterday. So we'll be analyzing that data and hopefully putting together an updated report. So summary, Site development plans have moved in a positive direction. We've reduced disturbance, we've reduced earthwork, we've reduced the number of removed trees, we've reduced our impervious area, we've increased our proposed trees. Peer reviews have been constructive. We currently meet all the applicable articles of the zoning bylaw. Excited to hear what you guys think of this latest version and discussing, next steps moving towards maybe an approval. With that, I have my architect and the traffic engineer here tonight, and then civil engineer had a family matter come up, but I believe one of his colleagues may be on Zoom if we need him.
Okay. Great.
Can I ask you to go back to one plan that you went?
Sure.
Could you go back to the cut fill analysis?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure I understand how much earthwork is here.
Get a little closer.
That's all right. I have it on my screen. That's okay. Do you know the volumes? The volumes of cut?
Yeah, so it looks like they're in the table, 10.6 of cut and 10.1 of fill, 500 export. Likely doesn't include, foundations, drainage, utility, trenches, any of that.
So you're assuming that all your cut material can be used on site? If you have 10.6 of cut and 10.1 of fill, and you're saying
No, well, so
your
yes, in this calculation, it's considered.
I mean, that's just straight math.
Right.
That might not work.
Right.
Out, though.
No, and we know it doesn't. There is some sort of undocumented organic fill on this site that probably won't be able to be reconditioned and reused.
Yeah. So your export could be
Yeah,
much greater than
could
500
be.
yards.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you go to the site sections? So when I was looking at this, and well, first of all, thank you for your presentation and your response to our comments. Having them laid out the way you did and really addressing them is helpful, to move this along. But these sections are concerning to me. And that's why I think I requested them at our last meeting. And so you see it here in terms of the cut and the fill. And it makes me wonder about your site design strategy. If you reverse the building and the parking, you could drive up to a parking and slope up to a building, and you would need a lot less fill. And I recognize that we don't love seeing parking from the street. However, when I go to the 3D view, I'm looking at something which is like, this a stone wall or whatever the retaining wall will be. I'm going to see that primarily, and I'm not going to see the building so much here. So, I think some of the site strategy here is causing more impacts than it has to. So I'm wondering if you've looked at it, or if you've thought about it.
Yes, I mean, early on in the process, you evaluate different layouts to see, earthwork is typically a target at the beginning to try to minimize that. I think putting the parking in the rear was seen as an advantage for everybody. Look at what you just spent the last, 30, 45 minutes discussing. In general, a parking lot and a building kind of sit at one elevation. So whether you flipped them or didn't, you would still have relatively similar.
You don't have to, though, right? You don't have to have the parking. This is the thing. I look at this, and we're trying to work on some of our site plan approval process and requirements, and this topographic change is something that continues to come up, and because we're not working with the land. The land has slope, and you want it to be totally flat, and it doesn't have to be totally flat, to have a site work. And there's plenty of places that they work with the topography, and you have parking, and you have to walk on the sidewalk or something to get to the place that you're going. And This strategy of this site is working against the topography in all ways, the most that it absolutely can, because it's having so much retaining wall. That's the design feature that you're seeing, is the retaining wall. And we haven't talked about the materials of that so much yet, but we're going to get to it, where you're suggesting that this is the block. And again, these also are designed to have water come through them. So, the appearance of that wall, that's the design feature that we're all going to see. So, that I would see parking with a landscape buffer. This building is set quite a bit further back. It doesn't have the same kind of site considerations as the Central Ave that we were just looking at. And so, we had asked whether the building needed to be a straight rectangle, whether there could be some design, changing the roof a little bit doesn't really accomplish that in my view. So, and then, looking at the geotechnical report, the other thing that concerns me about it, and we don't have a construction management plan, but in other projects, but since I've been on the board, when you remove this much from the landscape and you have any water, kind of, storms or anything, that the soil becomes unstable, and it says so, that's a concern in the geotechnical report. So I think, the least amount of this kind of heavy slope change could be better in terms of any runoff that you might be looking at trying to manage. And I say trying to manage because the kind of storms that we're getting these days are coming down so much rain so quickly. I can find the exact language in here that addresses that. If others want to go ahead and talk while I look for that.
Could I, just to continue, Cheryl, with Cheryl's question, have you tried to site the building, as Cheryl had said, in the back of the site?
Yeah, I wouldn't say as anything recent that I could tell you, how things laid out. I think we've sort of chosen this. We've, worked to make it the most applicable in this layout. It meets all of our setback parameters. It gets, a confined footprint. We've reduced it even further with conceding on some playground widths. We find it pretty economical. To your point on working with the topography, operationally, it becomes a challenge for us a little bit to look at stairs and ramps. Parents with 2 or 3 kids, parents with car seats, it's convenient and a benefit to be able to have, the easy access.
I'm just going to point out in the geotech report, it's page 12, the weather performance criteria. It says the glacial till is generally moisture sensitive. Every effort should be made to maintain drainage of surface water runoff away from construction areas by grading and limiting the exposure of excavations and prepared subgrades to rainfall. And it also says under subgrade protection maintenance, the glacial till is generally moisture sensitive and may degrade if exposed to inclement weather, freeze-thaw cycles, or repeated construction traffic. So I do think at a minimum, we need a construction management plan that references the geotechnical report. There's a lot of recommendations and suggestions in this report.
I completely agree with you, and it's something that in construction we would focus on. It's means and methods. It's certainly, if we're going down that avenue, the last thing I want to do is put anything that we're spending money on and building at risk of failure. It's hard for me. It'll be a requirement of construction for us to put such a plan together. But like I'm already sort of seeing here, in asking me to flip a parking lot in a building is a big ask. To me, to put together a full construction management plan, I see that putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I completely understand your concerns.
I think what we could ask, Cheryl, Bowl is an excellent firm, and but what you're reading is, and this sometimes happens, projects get approved, and then when they get to the stage of construction, the viability of the plan, when it becomes reality, becomes problematic. And I've spent my entire career in construction, and had to design plenty of sites that probably not enough thought went into.
The guy who designs it never builds it.
Well, you know, you are moving every yard of earth that you possibly could move, either under the building, where the building's gonna go, under the parking lot, or I believe that's some sort of a drainage basin in front. Every yard of earth under all of that area, your entire construction area the front is being cut out and it's moved to the building. The back is being cut out and it's being moved to the building. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work. And, you know, if the soils are subject to stability based on, you know, weather, rain, this is going to be a nightmare for a site contractor, a nightmare, because you're just not able to work with stable soils if you're dealing with inclement weather. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be good to have a point of view, like a real, Bo is not a site contractor, but this looks like a very expensive site project, very expensive.
There certainly will be costs in the earthwork. I will say in the site plan set that was submitted, there are a few pages of erosion control that probably include silt fence, and I believe the stormwater peer review even talked about it. But I understand where you're coming from.
I'll read the geotech report. I apologize, I haven't read it, but what I'm talking about is stability of soil. You know, when you look at how much earth you're going to move and compacted layers of fill, it's an enormous problem if the soil's not stable. You know, and if you're trying,
you're talking long term, not temporary.
No, I'm talking about when you're trying to build it. I'm talking about when you're trying to build it, which I think is really what that geotech report is talking about.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is we have a site in Milton where, it was during construction and, trees were removed and topsoils removed and it was a lot of slope to it. And during heavy rains, there was a lot of runoff from that and soil from that onto neighboring properties that caused significant damage. And those homeowners came back to the planning board and asked for and they went to the building department and everyone asking for some attention to it. And the board did pay attention to it. There was litigation, there was a lot. I'm just raising it because it was a pretty significant challenge for everyone involved with that. And, so I see that, Mr. Platt from Bowler's here.
I was going to say he has his hand up, so, yeah.
But, I'm hopeful that you will think about and at least come back to us with having talked with your team about this idea of flipping the property,
sure.
the location of the building on the property. And then, some of this discussion might change a bit with that in terms of, how much soil you're really going to, to need to do this extensive work, because, they can look at how this might grade with the parking lot and, the idea that you would, maybe you can have a drop off and then, the parking for staff is on a different level. It's something just to think about rather than the default of a flat site when you're not working on a flat site.
Sure.
Just one last question on the topic that Cheryl was talking about in terms of those parking spaces, how many of those are staff and how many are needed for the drop-offs of your
So that's a hard question to answer because it's so fluid.
Yeah.
But 32 staff members, uncommon to have all of them there at the exact same time, unless there's some sort of on-site event.
Yeah.
We typically we've studied it in 15-minute intervals, and at most we have about 6 parents come or go in that 15-minute interval. So I think our number is 37 that we absolutely target.
But in some way, shape, or form, you have 195 students. So you have 195 drop-offs and 195 pickups. And that's probably what you're concerned most about in terms of people making their way from, a lower level to the school. Is that really your concern?
So if you had the entrance at the front, so not only would you move the building, but you have the entrance on the other side, at least you could conceivably have a drop-off in front and then parking spaces lower. I just something, I'm not trying to design the site here in the meeting, but I do think
Respectfully, I'll go back and look at it and see, if there is a way to be efficient with the grading that comes on the site.
That'd be great. And if you don't mind while you do it, and I'm behind, you probably heard what I said at the start of the meeting. I'll catch up, but it'd be good for us to understand the benefits to the position you're showing on the plan now and the limitations if it were to be where Cheryl said. It just so we can understand that.
And to be clear, to a point, we want to come into your town and we want to fit within the residential area and plan appropriately. But we have a brand and a standard of what Gardner School is, right? And parking right out front, easy access. Everyone has to get in, code in, go through a couple doors for security. Having to weave up a ramp or upstairs, it goes against kind of our standard and what we're trying to offer to our students and our parents. So this is certainly our preference. We like to work with you guys, but again, I think we fit within a lot of boxes here on what's required, so I can't promise you anything. Your idea of a staff level parking at a different elevation, maybe there's a consideration there, but there's already a lot of work that's been done, so I'm going to see it very difficult to really get too far away from this plan. Flipping building and parking is a consideration. I'll give you that just because it is kind of a flip-flop. But I'll tell you, I think we're in a pretty good spot at this point. I don't know that we're going to see any huge changes in terms of site layout.
Yeah, if I could jump in on the site layout issue.
Yes, please, go ahead.
No, thank you. I'm Andy Platt with Bowler, working on site design here. So a lot of the issues that Chris just mentioned are correct. We went through a few iterations on grading. As you saw from the cut fill volumes, this thing it's pretty much balanced as close as you can get. So no matter what we do, if we start changing, like adding tiers, we're going to have more cut definitely. This grading plan kind of allowed us to put the building almost pretty much as low as we could, while keeping everything balanced. And then to Chris's point, with the type of people using this site, get parents bringing kids in, possibly even carrying them in kid carriers, you kind of have to have a level parking lot. And then there's also ADA access to consider, especially from the street. So to have steep slopes up from the parking lot to the building probably isn't going to work too well for this site or for this use. So I just wanted to add to that.
So, I guess if I'm hearing a reluctance that you're coming to us with what you presume to be a final plan with a few minor tweaks, I think it's a shame that you didn't come to the board in an advisory capacity or come to the planning department in an advisory capacity. I also think it's a shame that you think that you can just bring in a prototype and plop it on a site that doesn't fit your prototype. That's not working with the community and not working with the neighborhood, in my view.
Can I ask what you mean by advisory? Because
Well,
I did a pre-app. I sat here last time and we took a lot of notes and I took a lot of feedback. So
this is engineered out, and you said that you've
but
already
that's
done a
required
lot
for
of
my
work.
submittal.
Yeah, but you don't have to. You can do an advisory, which is you're not having the submittal. You just look. You're going to say, "I'm going to submit. I'm going to be submitting."
Sure.
We want to get your feedback before we submit, in case there's anything you want to change, because it's a problem for us when you come in with something that's fully baked that you say you can't change. Because then this is just a rubber stamp process, which I don't like. I think our process is to look at this and see where the impacts are and to see if we can help make it better. And it's not just, a few trees and a few parking spaces, in my view. So I would like to at least have you take a look and show us at least something in sketch format, which says, to justify that this is the best site layout. That's just me, one opinion.
And I understand it. And I was at no point advised or indicated that advisory meetings were possible, right? I had the pre-app. I've had conversations with Tim. I didn't realize that, there's a step because I spent a lot of money to put a full site plan set together. Had I known I only had to put a site and a grading plan together to get feedback from you guys, I certainly would have considered it.
Okay.
The last meeting, we probably wouldn't have had a full plan set. I probably would have had a couple sheets.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an aspect of this that, we target sites based on kind of what we believe we can fit our plan into. I understand I've got large walls. I'm happy to decorate them, plant them accordingly, really help us blend into the site so we don't stick out. I understand it's on an elevated, grade. But again, we targeted it knowing we could fit this building, we could fit our parking, we could operate, we could provide access to the right of way, all of those things, fully within your criteria. So, I don't come in here trying to bully or be rude about it, right? I've done my research to know that we can propose a building on this property, and I come in, willing to work with you cooperatively on kind of our brand.
So it's just my understanding though, and I understand it's a Dover protected use, and I know that probably, makes you think that you can do things, as of right, which you can. But what we can do is we can impose reasonable regulations in the areas of the bulk and height of the structures, yard size, lot size, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage requirements. So there's a lot of latitude for the board to actually have input and request some changes. I think this is I'm not as nice as Cheryl and Sean. I don't think this is an acceptable look. I think this looks like that prison on 128. And I just don't think that is what we want in our town. I was against another project which had 17-foot retaining walls. That's 14 feet. And all you did was plant those, look like green giant arborvitaes. And you're deforesting, what was it? 2 acres?
Yeah.
3 acres.
Almost 4.
And putting lawn, So to me, I don't think this is acceptable, the way this looks right now, for the town as a whole and specifically for the neighbors. And, I'm not sure, planting 89 trees is that doesn't excite me. So I do think, Cheryl and Sean have much greater experience, and I think you'd be wise to listen, and take their advice. And just personally, it's just, I don't know, it does not fit into the neighborhood or the town.
With the concern being its elevation above adjacent grade.
Yeah, and the removal of all those trees.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Right? That the site we've chosen, the trees are going to be removed. A large number of them are invasive. I've read through the bylaw. We talked about a replacement policy. Just so you're aware, it's kind of incomplete. They haven't chosen a fee in lieu yet, as far as I've heard. I understand your perspective. I don't know that the walls go away in any condition. We talked about a 2-story building. It just doesn't really lend itself to this situation any more than the 1-story building. Like I said, we're pretty balanced here. We've minimized our footprint. We've looked at going back. We talked about this last meeting. Going back only puts us into a steeper slope.
What about going down, just down with the elevation? So this wall isn't 14 feet, it's more like 7.
It just puts the wall on the backside, puts more cut into the side of the slope.
Yeah, and I'd rather see it back there than here. I mean, it looks like we have a very big wall, and then we also have a very tall building. And so if you could get that 22-foot height, I know that's at the peak of the entrance, but if you went 20 feet, lower than 20 feet, you shrunk the building and shrunk the wall, I think it would be a little bit more appealing from the street. And I get it, you may have to do a 2-tiered retaining wall in the back.
Right.
And take down a few more trees, but I think that is less impactful than looking at this every day. I mean, is there a reason why you can't drop the actual elevation?
Just the substantial export that then comes at that point, right? You would just basically take that plan. I'll draw just to make it a little clear, right? This red line, you would basically take that red line and lower it to this point.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is all becoming cut. So now we've just taken the site and dug an even bigger hole.
But based on the geological report and the amount of, what do they call it?
There's a lot of rock. So our parking lot sits on rock right now, which is part of the reason you brought up tree plantings. We for two reasons, chose shrubs to remain within our parking lot islands. We're probably gonna have to put some drainage under our parking lot anyways. So that lowering from that aspect is also gonna hold me into this site plan a little bit more, just because of the substantial rock we'd have to dig out. I'm going through it.
Or maybe you tier your employee parking on the ledge, right?
So
There isn't
problem with
rock under the
separating-
building, there's
I
rock
can
under the
separate a
parking
few
lot.
spaces, but again, my parking isn't employee parent really. It's in peak hour, it's mostly parent. So it's hard for me I can do it a little bit in terms of tiered.
Yeah, I mean, if you could take that front wall down, I think for me, I would really welcome that. And then if you could, the height of the building came down a little, but that's just one guy speaking.
I can talk with the architects here. He can weigh in if he needs to. Height of the building, you want me to lower the 22 feet in addition?
Well, I'm just thinking for a one-story building, why does it have to be 22
It's
feet
just to
at the
hide
peak?
our RTUs at the top. So if
Sure, if you want to come up.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think there'll be some. There's another microphone you can hit that, yeah.
Hi, I'll introduce myself. I'm Josh Helselsauer. I'm with NOR, the project managers for architecture and engineering on this project. So basically, when we look at the size of the building, right, say we use 9-10 foot for your overall ceiling, right? Roughly, just based on size and what we need for structure, weight of RTUs, drainage, you're looking at about 2 feet of steel. And then I need about 2 feet to 2.5 feet of room for duct. So above my ceilings, I need about 4 or 5 feet just for all of that. Above that, you're looking at standard height is maybe 3 foot for your rooftop unit. So most planning boards prefer, if you look at your sightline diagram, you're looking at trying to minimize that impact. So at that point, you're at about 17 feet, which is the mansard roof is, I think 17.6 is what we call it to be.
Yeah, if you look at the elevation, you probably find it. And that's good info. What I was going to say then is, given our relationship to Blue Hill, although we have neighbors to consider as well, you may be able to reduce the mansard height only because we're already elevated a little bit. So visibility would help. So we could certainly look at that.
That's cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
I think what makes it challenging, Josh, is, it's the road elevation to what Cheryl pointed out earlier is the 22 feet is probably not, it's not as daunting if your building isn't as elevated as it is, right?
No,
So
that's
we're seeing a significant amount. I mean, that whole grade change between your building slab elevation and the roadway is retaining wall.
Mm-hmm.
A lower retaining wall and then a higher retaining wall. So what did you say it was, 13 feet of wall? I mean, overall.
17 feet
17
wall.
feet of wall.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's
And then you've got the retention basin, which is dropping down too.
17 feet of wall as we're in here is probably the underside of the roof joist. It's a lot of, that's right. I mean, 10 plus, it's 7. It's a lot of, you're just driving by looking at wall. Yeah, and I think you'd be okay with 22 feet if you didn't have 17 feet of wall.
Right. It's almost like one or the other, or just reduce both by a little.
And unfortunately, what's going on in town now is the 40B project on Randolph Ave. So they went in and deforested that whole section, and they have the back, you just look up and it is just naked. The whole site is naked. And so we know what to expect. And I don't want that happening again in Milton on this side of town. I think that was a shame what happened over there. Trees could have been saved and they didn't. They weren't. Nobody cared for them. And I understand it's easier to build. But to be honest with you, that's not our problem if it's easier for you to build. We're here to protect the neighbors and the town. And if it's a little bit more work for you to protect the trees and the existing topography, that's kind of our job.
So, and I'll start by saying this, I never go into a project approaching 40B, or in our case, 40A, right? And I know that people have mixed feelings. 40B can be approached in the wrong way, which is why I come in here asking for thoughts, incorporating feedback. With that being said, we aren't just saying, here's our plan, take it or leave it, right? I will build a stone-like retaining wall. I will build elements and materials that help it blend in within reason, right? That's the phrase that we always come back to. There's nothing, and I don't do this on purpose or to be rude about it. There's nothing in the criteria that says what we've proposed today doesn't meet the standards of Milton, right? And I don't want to work or operate in that way, but we have to work together and come to a meeting point.
So I just would like to add a little bit to that. I would like to see that it is right now when you drive down Blue Lab, what you're looking at are trees, you're looking at forest. I would like to see some of that preserved because I think that would also go a long way with offsetting the height, because obviously you're going to have, so even if you reduce it somewhat, it's still going to be elevated. So keeping a buffer of forest, that we did that with, various projects, Walcott Woods, they were required to keep certain buffers. So I think rather than having all of this lawn area, if you kept and, have it fenced during the construction, process, in the construction management plan, that you protected all of those trees along that streetscape, that would go a tremendously long way.
Meredith, can I just comment? On their grading and drainage plan, they're proposing so much regrading there that you're not going to be able to keep any trees.
That was my question with that retention
So the regrading,
area there
are
regrading.
a stretch of trees along Blue Hill Ave that were shown as to remain in our original plan.
What is the depth of that? How many? What is the setback on that from the road?
They're pretty close because they were right on our property line. The problem was looking into the drainage concerns and the issues that were raised. We are taking the approach of improving that swale to make sure that we're getting the drainage where it needs to go, making sure we aren't creating any issues. And in doing so, we've widened it, we've deepened it, we've made it adequate. And in doing so, we've pushed ourselves.
Are you required to have any sort of fencing around that?
No, there's an existing guardrail.
Okay.
And as of right now, no sidewalk.
Okay. I did see you were requested to have that guardrail removed at some point.
We will have to work with DOT for a portion of it to get the access point.
All right, but you don't need, because we have a really unattractive, the Thatcher Montessori School, which has a really unattractive.
That got brought up last time, and I need to drive by and make
it's
sure
really
I do that.
really
it's
bad.
Not on Google Earth yet.
Yeah,
You could take a look at Walcott Woods, also has retention pond or retention basin in front where there's some natural buffer. I mean, Meredith, may I just jump in? Because what you're commenting about the trees, I mean, maybe another idea would be to shift everything back further, which means you would have less need of fill. You would have cut, but you're not cutting as much as you're filling right here, to give yourself a buffer zone that's an undisturbed zone towards Blue Hill Ave.
And I like that idea. I considered that when we were thinking about how to get a stone wall, which was brought up. There was really nowhere to put it there. We had looked at like a stone wall with evergreens of some kind right there to kind of screen our site right off of Blue Hill Ave. So maybe
if you take the guardrail out, can you then fit the stone wall in?
Because if you move it back and you preserve some trees, and if you move it back means you have a shorter retaining wall, then maybe it's accomplishing some of what we're trying to do with suggesting the flip. So it could be an alternative to that works better for you. It'll be more disturbance probably this side, but if you can, the trees that you would be removing here, you could consider an offset to keeping the trees here. So your total tree loss should be the same as long as you can protect those trees in front. I can see that as being, an alternative that's not as significant change to you that would accomplish some of what we're seeking here.
And I think that and then the next thing that the architecture is, and I'm not, but I do feel like it's very generic. And it's probably, you've done this project probably in a number of locations, a number of sites. And I don't think this is customized for this site in our town. But I would like for you to maybe, I haven't gone on your website to look through your portfolio of other projects that you've done in residential suburban communities that do have a little bit more, I would say, of a New England feel. Somebody uses the term, this could be anywhere in the country. I feel like it could be anywhere. I think what we're looking for is something that has more of a New England, a little more classic, and I think lower. I'm glad you added a little bit more of a peak on the roof line. I think even more adding some dormers, maybe some style of windows. I think you can do.
Certainly.
I think maybe look at other
Elements
projects.
like that I can support. I think those are relatively simple ads. They don't steer too far away from what the Gardner School is.
And I think the neighbors had really good comments. Adding that stone wall,
I'm not
trees.
from here, so I don't see it a ton, but it felt like a couple of those outside of the dormers, and like you're saying, the character in the windows.
Yeah.
It's just lap siding. It's just this has a little more texture and character to the materials. It sounds like what we need to do is look at, like you're saying, maybe some decorative arched windows, or I'll leave that to you.
I would look at the roof
Can you
pitch,
explain
too.
to us what is your protected aesthetic? You talked about your brand, the Gardner brand, architecturally.
Sure.
What is it? What is the?
Well, so in Massachusetts, it's still being worked on, right? This would be our 5th location, but we've got 4 schools that are kind of this scheme of materials, color, textures. So this is kind of what we're bringing to the Massachusetts market. And we've changed things. We have a different asphalt roof material on certain schools. We changed the stone material on this one. But for the most part, all of our schools have these 3 siding materials, have the stone with the black and white contrast. There's a gray element in there that doesn't come through.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a covered, sorry, Meredith. I'm
No, go
jumping
ahead.
on you. You don't have a covered area outside the entrance, so like if you
that,
wanted
just
to
some
open an
recommendations
umbrella
that
or something like that,
It
like a
is-
porch-like appearance.
So this
It's about
is,
2 feet deep.
and I would say we would be open to that, but given that the building faces the other direction, I think there's other aspects of the building that we could focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say we approach this. I mean, obviously, there's a brand standard from, as you locate from location to location. Massachusetts, as you drive down, you see a lot of lap siding, single sloped, single gable end roofs, very salt blocks, very traditional, getting into some of the Cape Cod style designs. So you kind of try to balance that with what you see in a lot of planning boards and planning zone regulations as far as, roof height undulations, variation in materials, and having, a little bit of depth that often you kind of miss with that residential architecture when you try to merge the 2 styles together on a building that's larger for the scale. So, I mean, obviously in this case, you can look at something like, the gray material and shifting the couple different sidings we have there is an attempt to, break up that horizontal span that we have, kind of reduce the footprint and the heft of what could possibly be there.
I think it's going to be hard to do in such shallow changes in plane on a 16,000 square foot building.
That's understandable.
So, that's another thing, if you hear our concerns about the design in terms of the walls and the bulk of the building, like we mentioned last time, in terms of that overall length. As you consider what modifications you can make, if you had a greater change in plane, you took part of the building and you shifted it, I understand there's cost efficiency to having just a box, which, that's what this is. But it's not a huge jump to have some shift in that architecturally, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
This was-
that's just a response.
And this was just one of the residents who's actually in the audience tonight had sent us a really thoughtful letter on who's a neighbor and a butter. And these are extra copies, and I don't know if you saw those, one for the architect and one for
These
yourself.
are new. These aren't from
This
last
is from last week. I don't know if that was, if that was
Think
something you received, but,
A couple weeks old.
but it's, yeah, that was from a couple of weeks
Yeah,
ago.
Tim,
You-
yes.
Yeah, you just saw that from Tim. It was just,
Yeah.
I thought it was a really thoughtful memo that I just wanted to make sure.
When you mentioned the materials and the texture,
Mhm.
you made no reference to the windows and doors. You did mention. You
To be fair, I'm
mentioned-
not an architect, so
I'm sorry.
I'm not an architect, so
Josh
it's,
is. Yeah. Are you flexible in terms of changing the windows, achieve the same amount of light, but something that doesn't look as commercial as how that looks?
I will have to pass that by the brand standard man, obviously, but I mean, it's certainly an option. I mean, there's flexibility in what you look at. If you go to a residential style window, you lose a little bit of the height. It's much more expensive cost wise. These are, being storefront, we have a little bit of flexibility with how we can do it and still meet, standards for maintenance,
That'd be great.
things to that
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah, selection on doors and windows, in my opinion, we have an architect at the table. It has an incredible impact on any building.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, it draws your eye, that style of window. And as our resident who had given that to you, he's making a point to, and this is what Maggie, and you probably heard this from Cheryl earlier, while we all appreciate brand,
Absolutely.
we also have a responsibility to the residents to do our very best to preserve the character of the town as much as we possibly can in a residential district. It just makes sense to try to do that.
and I don't mean to repeat myself, but we are becoming a member of this community, so I'm going to find every opportunity to meet you in the middle on some of these
Good.
things.
You sounded more rigid earlier. You're coming around.
The site is where I struggle.
These are our taxpayers sitting here.
I get it.
And the folks that are watching tonight.
I get it. I do. We've been through a number of these, and we can find a line in every situation where we meet board who represents the neighbors in the community. And so I think we can do that again. I just, to your point on being rigid, I don't think it's going to be necessarily on site layout in terms of placement of parking and building, but maybe it is about exact location, lowering things, putting the wall in the back, maybe changing some of the architectural elements, things like that.
Mm-hmm. I do want to go back to just a question, and I appreciate Andy's comment about achieving a balanced site, right? But while it's or close to a balanced site, right? I mean, the idea is
and we can consider that in looking at things a little bit.
I have enough experience to know that whatever Andy calculated is not going to happen. You're going to be trucking more than 500 yards off the site, and probably everybody realizes that. But you're moving a tremendous amount of earth. While the math says 500 yards leave the site, your math also says that you're about 21 or 22,000 yards of movement in terms of cutting and so forth. But I think the factor here that's really daunting is what Cheryl started with earlier. It's that elevation of the building and the retaining walls. What's the reason that what's the reason that
Andy touched on it before, the placement of the building.
You haven't heard my question yet, or all of it. What's the reason that the elevation of the slab has to be that high?
I guessed right. So Andy touched on it earlier. The ability to get our building to that elevation is somewhat driven by an ADA slope up to the parking lot. The slope of the parking lot, the drive lane
Take us to a site plan and just show us this.
Let's see here.
And if Andy's here with us, if Andy wants to speak to this since Andy's representing Bowler, we'd be happy to hear from Andy.
This is the landscape plan, but it's
as
lines.
Chris said, we needed to keep the building at an elevation that worked with the cut and fill volumes, but also was still accessible from the street. So we've got a sidewalk leading from the street up to the parking lot, and that's just under the 5% allowed by ADA requirements. So to change that, to go steeper, we really can't go steeper. I guess we can go a little bit lower, but that definitely affects the earthwork calculations.
It wouldn't be steeper that we'd be asking for. I guess, just what I'm looking at is if that, what did we say, 17 feet of wall? Is that what we said we have? If that 17 feet of wall was 8 feet of wall, it'd be much more appealing.
I agree. And I think that your colleague brought that up, and I agree with, even if it's a sacrifice in a little bit more export, that is something that I would happily look at, because I agree with you. We stick out of the ground a little bit, and that's certainly a topic that we could potentially address.
I'm pretty confident.
I'm worried about the rock, but I'll take that back to my side and figure out.
I'm pretty confident if you had a site contractor take a look at it, for an evaluation, I don't think you're going to create more expense. Honestly, I don't think you will, because you're moving all that earth anyway. You would be lower, but remember, every foot you lower is one less foot that you're placing fill back in. You're taking all that fill out anyway.
I agree with you. The rock, I can't lower the parking lot and I start getting into rock, and that's 20,000 square feet of rock breaking that I'm going to get into. Then you talk about blasting, let's not talk about it right now.
We can't design this in the meeting, but I think we're probably.
I understand where you guys are.
Yeah, enough ideas to explore.
I do.
I just have, I wanted to ask a question.
And then I want to let any of the neighbors speak, yeah.
Is the stormwater design based on the soils that are identified in the geotechnical report? Because I think the drainage report is from August, and the geotech report is from September. And we kind of ran into this on the memory care that we reviewed, where the stormwater was based on, sort of assumed based, I think it's federal standards or state standards on the location. So I guess that's my question for maybe you or Bowler.
Yeah, let's hit Andy to.
Because I did also notice that there were a couple of borings where you did run into groundwater, even though it's very dry, as Maggie said. And one was in front in that retention basin. So anyway, I did want to understand if your design is based on what was found in the borings and in the report.
Yeah, you're correct that the drainage design was done before we had the geotechnical information, but we made some conservative assumptions up front, which turned out to be proven true by the geotechnical report. So everything should match up now. In fact, the geotechnical report had some infiltration testing in there, which showed that infiltration rates in the basin are actually at least twice as high as what we estimated in our analysis. And we kept those original rates of infiltration just to be safe. So everything lines up, including the groundwater elevations.
So given that, would you be able to reduce the size of the basin if your infiltration is faster than what you were assuming?
Well, it's always good to have a factor of safety. I mean, in theory we could, but I think one of the things we're trying to do is reduce the runoff as much as possible. So we're trying to hold back as much water as possible because we know there's a flooding issue downstream. So we're trying to do everything we can to reduce that. And that's just the size of the basin helps with that.
The flooding concerns that were raised last time, Andy and I had a conversation about if there was a way to actually hold more water than required by standards to sort of in good faith do our part to ensure that we weren't causing any more of the problem. And in sort of deciding to keep the infiltration rate conservative was our kind of approach to saying we should be helping, not hurting the situation.
So if I understand it correctly, there's a pretty big swale, what we're looking at top of plan here. And then that's a small retention basin, and it's piped over to the larger retention basin, is that right? Or piped over to another swale?
Yeah, the small, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, the small detention basin you're referring to is a sediment forebay. So that's removing sediment. It's part of our DEP treatment train for sediment removal. And then that overflows into the larger actual infiltration basin.
I was actually thinking on the other side of the drive, there's a So if you scroll plan down.
She's talking about like the scour.
The one at the rear parking
This,
lot?
this
Right
here.
there.
Okay. Yeah, that has no function as a detention basin. It doesn't hold any water back, but it is, like Chris said, an armored scour hole. So you've got a swale to the left of that on the plan that's coming down, like a rock armored swale that comes down from the hillside and empties into that hole there, which is kind of where the water goes right now. I mean, we're not changing the drainage patterns at all. And then it just enters that pipe and goes along the roadside swale.
Are you deepening that hole from what's there now?
I think it's roughly the same. It might be like a foot or two deeper than the existing grade, but it's roughly the same. It gets rather, there's a steep slope there to start with.
So in terms of like helping with runoff, you're concentrating it now into two places on the other side of the your site, right? North and south, I guess. So it's, or top and bottom of this plan, you're drawing it around your retaining walls and then taking it down to these places in a concentrated way, right? So I guess I'm wondering what happens. So you've designed for the 100-year. We've talked about how the 100 year is getting updated at the state level, what that means. So can you comment about that? Do you anticipate that it'll work with some new standards that might be taking into account how climate change is affecting the rain events?
Yeah, we used the current NOAA 14 rainfall data, so that's higher than the TP40 that's typically been used in the past with the DEP.
Okay.
So that those are the current rainfall amounts. And just to your point about concentrating flow, really the water the water is going to end up exactly where it was before, which is in that existing swale right by Blue Hill Avenue. So we're not really changing the drainage patterns at all. It was always going to be concentrated, or it is concentrated even under existing conditions at that swale.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think this is a good time to say thank you and let you all, I don't know when you think, how much time you might need to continue the public hearing, because we do have to continue it to a date and time certain.
I think another month out. I think it was December
12th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should target that, and we'll go. Okay. I'll go watch the meeting back, make a bunch of notes. We'll review these things. Obviously, we'll let them speak, and I'll hear what they have to say as well.
Right. Okay. So great. Thank you. That helps. And then any residents who would like to speak, you can come.
Okay, if we ask them questions?
Sure. Yes. If you'd like to come to the table.
Yes.
And just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tony Harani. I live 665 Blue Hill Avenue. I'll be 50 feet away from the driveway.
Okay.
So I just hope you guys haven't paid for this traffic study because it's not worth the paper it's printed on. They're advising you that in June, the traffic is 9% more than usual. Okay, I work at the VA hospital in Boston. I'm 7 miles away. It takes me 22 minutes in June, July, August to get to work. And it takes me an hour in September, October, November, December, okay? Who chose the date of the traffic study? The traffic study was done June 26 and June 27, okay? If you're looking at the traffic study on a state road that has a school 200 feet away, it has 2 other daycares, and it has Curry College.
They're doing
another. Run that study.
Yeah, they're doing another traffic study. I don't know if you heard that they are doing another study.
They should be doing this.
And they did a count from yesterday.
Yes.
They did a new count.
This is a disgrace.
Yeah,
they
that's going to be
the traffic study.
They're doing a new one.
During when really there is
yes, school is in
traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, this is incredible. You shouldn't have paid for this. I mean, this is not Michigan Avenue in Chicago. I heard you're from Chicago. The traffic on the damn thing is horrible. Okay, you're not taking into account Curry College. You're not taking into account Delphi Academy. You're not taking into account the small sprouts. You're not taking into account the other school at the end, Montessori school. So they choose June 26, 27, and they make the disgusting claim that June is usually 9% more. This is garbage. This is not the traffic study.
So they did another one.
Yeah, I hope so.
We're gonna see it soon.
Yeah, we haven't received it yet, but there will be a new study.
This is unbelievable. I mean, I do medical research at the VA. It's like doing a sleep study at 12 noon. I mean, you choose 2-3 days before July 4th, and you do a traffic study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I forgot, can I ask if we can do, when you're entering into the site, no left turn? And then when you're exiting the site, right turn only? Can we request that? For safety reasons? Because what's going to be damaging if you're coming down 138 and taking a left into the site, I think that's going to be problematic. So if you cannot take a left-hand turn, that might help, and you can only enter the site the other way.
That could generate more traffic
think it would
for
make-
folks, but we could ask the traffic consultant.
Because you may have to go
You want to
up,
comment?
turn, turn
Okay.
down.
Because they also said that most of their clients are coming 3 to 5 miles away, and Milton, most of Milton is north.
True.
So if they're going to be drawing customers from Milton, they would be coming from Milton, not from Canton.
Sort of train them to use Robin Street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates, and so one thing that I think you alluded to with something like a right-in, right-out kind of access, people may be looking for other locations to do U-turns in to come back around. So that's not something that's desirable. The other thing is that Mass DOT is going to have jurisdiction over the curb cut, so they're going to review it. I don't know that they would agree based on the traffic study that it warrants that kind of condition. We're not showing. I understand that there's concerns about the speed that's out there. There's concerns about the volume of traffic that's there. Based on and we are doing new counts, and there'll be a new study that'll be issued. But the results of the study so far show that it's not a significant issue to turn left into the site. There's a little more delay associated with turning left out of the site, but again, it's not like level of service F or any kind of supremely negative condition there.
Really? I was on it today. I went up to go look at the site, and it's very difficult, coming out, Green Street, all different points to get in and out from any of the side streets. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I
and to
think
cross over the
right.
lanes. But
And I'm not saying I'm not saying you just pull right up and leave. There's going to be delay associated with any of those side streets, but.
Yeah, it's not a problem at noontime.
Right.
But who's
Sure.
dropping their kid off at daycare at noon? You're using the daycare at the hours that everybody's on the road.
Right.
And we're all parents here, so we understand the concept of a daycare because we've all used it.
Yep.
So we understand baby things and being a pain in the butt, trying to walk from another parking lot. But that's what you do. When you pick a site, you just deal with how the site is. So if we can make the site better for our town and our residents, we're not really concerned with the customers of the site.
Yeah. No, I
We
think.
want- yeah. Thank you.
we're all
That's
on the same page.
okay. That's great. Thank you so much.
If I can add something.
Yep, sure.
I'll just put it here, like I said earlier, we're becoming a member of the community. The people coming to this place are in the community. They are familiar with traffic patterns and, when touring the site, when choosing to go there, they probably have a familiarity with, this is a busy road. We're probably gonna have to turn right when we drop our kids off. And they also know, the dangers of turning left if they are there, what the risks are. So they're not unfamiliar with it at the time that they come in and look at it as well.
Great, thank you. Anyone else from the abutters? Yes, if you'd like to join us, and just state your name and address for the record.
Sure.
That's great.
My name is Deborah Fitzgerald. I reside at 705 Blue Hill Ave, and I'm one of those driveways where I have to time it to get out. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I actually am concerned. I think the last meeting I couldn't make it, but somebody, my good friend over here, had brought up the considerations about the drainage, and I know that there was the Horley-Witten group made some, so I know there's some progress being made on that. And after hearing though that about the way it's looking at now with the water coming down. So that's a big concern. I just want to kind of reinforce that because I keep hearing about the 100-year storm, and we haven't had a 100-year storm, blah, blah, blah. But again, I know that you saw the photos, that it wasn't that long ago, and apparently things are getting worse and worse. If you can think about North Carolina and other areas that are getting it. So I just wanted to reinforce that. And I also wanted to say how much that I think I'm selling this for other people, but we're very encouraged that you are taking this so seriously. And this is my first time coming in to meet with you all. And I really want to thank you for taking our concerns very seriously and giving us a little voice.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And just in response, well, I know it was in the memo, actually, the Horsley-Witten. Are you going to be putting together, drafting some answers to the questions that were posed in, I don't know if you've seen their letter?
The Horsley-Witten, the Bowler should have put a comment response letter together.
Okay.
And I believe it was in the submittal package.
Has there been I didn't see a response letter.
Yeah, we submitted a letter in written response to those comments.
Okay, did Tim
I
get
think
a
it was
copy of that?
submitted on the 31st, or actually November 1st, I think it was submitted.
Tim, did you receive a copy of that response letter?
Yeah, we got that. I sent that out late. That should be in everyone's inbox and in the meeting
Great.
materials folder.
Terrific. Okay, great. That's great. Then I probably do have it in here. But thank
And
you.
if you want me to quickly summarize it, I can tell you that they're all technical issues. It really had no impact on the overall design or anything.
I think tonight, this is a good point because we have other items on the agenda. So I think, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that there was communication between the applicant.
And if you're
And
going
Horsley.
back to redesigning things, maybe consider not doing an artificial playground. That's just my last pitch.
So,
Can I ask why? Just so I'm aware, if I look at another material, I understand.
No.
So we want to, I'm on the Climate Action Committee meeting here in town, and we work closely with Sustainable Milton, and Sustainable Milton has submitted a letter on another project talking about how they're not in support of anything that's artificial and all the negative effects on public and environmental health. And they recommend using natural grass fields because it outweighs the benefits. So especially in the location where you are, you're in the middle of the Blue Hills, it would just seem very odd to have something artificial.
Okay, so the preference being
A natural. Or it could be wood chips.
Wood chips or something.
You know,
yeah, that's
we grew up on, I grew up on a wood chip playground down the street at Tucker School. So when I survived, that's just the way it is.
All right.
Yeah.
Just one more thing regarding traffic while we're all throwing our advice out. There's a street called Green Street, about 2 miles south on 138, same side of the road as your site. If you come out of Green Street and try to take a left on a 138 to head north, anywhere from like 7:30 to 9 o'clock. I suggest you guys try that. You'll get a good feeling of what your customers are gonna experience pulling out of your site.
Green Street would be south end of Little Sprouts.
Exactly, just south of that light.
Expressway. Yeah.
It's right across from the Blue Hills parking lot.
Okay.
And it's a great indication of what your customers are gonna feel when they pull out of your space.
Sure.
Great. Thank you all. And I know you traveled for this meeting, so
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I appreciate that.
You know, we'll take everything back and think about it and come back with some updates for you.
So with that, could I have a motion to move, to continue the public hearing to December 21st at 7:10? 12, I'm sorry, just
I won't make.
December 12th? Did I say the 21st? Sorry, I was looking at two different dates. To December 12th,
At 7:05?
or 7:05, yes. That's
So moved?
Second,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
My condolences. No one should have to go through that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now, thank you all for coming. Good night, good night, thanks. Sorry, we can now, we can now go back to the site plan approval discussion. And so Cheryl, you said you did make some edits to Tim's, the original draft. So I'm wondering if we go by section.
That's fine.
And then you can, if there's things that we can maybe, that you can send over to Tim that we could add.
Tim has what,
Okay, because maybe we can merge some things together. That's not too difficult.
I think what they have up might be what I added. So
Okay.
that first paragraph that, under purpose, you know, I think Tim said he got from different places, right?
And it's actually, the beginning is in our current site plan approval.
Yeah, there's, I don't remember where I got this, but apparently there was a bill that was pending in the legislature, and I'm not sure where it is, but I've also heard from someone that their legislature may be working on this again. It's on site plan approval. And so under the very beginning of it, they had this language in red is taken from that, which I thought, you know, was, I liked kind of the fact that it was something that they were already considering, but it added a little bit more than what's there currently in terms of consistency with character and scale of surrounding. So it kind of puts a little more definition to it.
So we could consider adding that to what is also there. It sort of reinforces that whole section.
It's either that or replace one sentence. I don't know, Tim, if you've had a chance to look at this or think about it. If you haven't, maybe you could, and let us know what you think at the next time we talk about
And we
it.
can we'll, you know, and I think we can go back and read it and say, okay,
Yeah.
this is redundant, or, because some things that I've added are redundant to some of our things that we'll have to walk through.
Because what I was thinking is once we get sort of the, you know, all of this, it's gonna need somebody like an attorney to review it because it's so much tied to law.
Right.
And at least they'll see our ideas of what we'd like to see, and they can tell us whether it should be organized differently or whether some things are off limits.
Right.
You know, that we hope for. But I thought we should put as much in as we think we might like.
Right.
Yeah, I've been talking with town council. Town council would be happy to look at any draft language that the board comes up with. And in fact, if you feel that you've got something at the end of the night that's in a state to have him look at, I can do that first thing tomorrow.
Okay, that would be great. All right.
Cheryl, what would the red text replace
Well,
or be added?
see where it says in the second sentence, site plan review as a means of managing aesthetics?
Yeah.
I thought you still need to probably keep
I see.
regulation of permitted uses, not their prohibition.
Yep.
But it could be something kind of worked into that. So I do think it might need a little language rework there. But I just thought for the moment, I would just take it verbatim from that.
That's great.
bill.
That's a great addition.
Yeah, okay.
Because it ties in with some of the things that I had.
Did you all have, Maggie or Meredith, anything else in that paragraph?
No.
Mine was all added at the end.
Oh, at the end,
Oh, like
okay.
pages and pages.
Oh,
of it.
no, really? I haven't seen that then. All right.
Yeah, so I think purpose, I think that's,
seen it either.
I think that's good. I had brought in the applicability, I can't speak it after 9:30, applicability, inserting that, and Tim was able to add.
Yeah, so on that, it seems to me, shouldn't we be able to include mixed use? This says no multifamily building. And then we go on to
Oh, I'm sorry, you know what, I did have, sorry.
commercial, but we don't say mixed use in here. So this is under applicability.
Oh, sorry, you know what, I had added one thing under the original framework.
Okay.
That I thought we could insert, which I noticed in another site plan had the authority. And
Do we have authority
Isn't
down
that- yeah,
lower?
that's
It's
further down,
lower, I
yeah.
think, Meredith.
oh, maybe that could, okay. Is that what, from yours, or is that from what I sent over? Maybe it's.
Oh, I see.
Okay, as long as it's in there, that's fine. Okay, authority is, great. All right, so moving on to applicability, that's,
So I guess what I was thinking is, do we need to be explicit to say it includes mixed use? And then the other thing is under item B, it says interior renovation work that makes no change in the exterior appearance is excluded. However, I feel like just this last application shows us that interior renovation work could have a significant impact on neighbors if it goes from something that's 5 days a week to 7 and the hours are extended. So I feel like we shouldn't exclude interior for that reason. I don't think, it may be that it's something that, we haven't really talked about staff review. This might be something where a staff could take a look and say, look, the things are, it's just the same use, they're just making renovations and we don't need it. But I don't think it should be excluded carte blanche because of.
right, for that reason,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I do believe the more we put in, the better.
Yeah.
And then we can waive things if
it's not,
needed.
if it's not applicable.
Right.
Yeah. So those were the two things I thought under applicability.
So should we cross that, should we say interior renovation work?
That needs, so we would need to add mixed use somewhere, and I wasn't sure if it should be under commercial or under A or B, or should we need a C for mixed use? I don't know. But then I think we should strike that the interior renovation work.
Yeah, I agree. Let's strike that.
Sentence.
And I think it makes sense to do a C and do a separate for mixed use, just so it's clear to the reader, the applicant.
We're striking the interior renovation?
It's because it says it's excluded. We can just say it
okay.
shall be included.
Yeah.
But
What if you said if there were
maybe.
any change of use, interior renovation causing any change of use, increase, decrease, or different use?
yeah, like that.
That's really what you're getting at.
Yeah, so this says interior renovation work that makes no change.
Use, this is just construction on the property.
Right, so what I was saying is right now, the last sentence says interior renovation work that makes no change in the exterior appearance of a commercial building shall be excluded from this site plan review requirement, which I didn't agree with because of what we just saw.
So
Um,
say it again, Sean, the way you had worded that.
Interior renovation work that would make any change of use increase, decrease, or different. I think that's, I don't know, I have to listen to the tape. It sounded better when I said it the first time.
It always does.
In terms of use.
Diane's
So
typing.
I just, Cheryl, I wanted to chime in on your characterization here. I don't think that the 10 Bassett Street example is a good one, because the reason why it's in site plan approval right, or not anymore, but it had been in the state that it's in, is really because of, if you think about if that project had been done in the way that the board would have recommended, it would have been a straight site plan approval based on the 800 square feet of exterior change. So that project was caught by the normal site plan approval standards. And, you know, really what brought it back into site plan approval was the change to the original plan. So I don't think that including interior changes does anything for you that would have caught that project in a way that it didn't already get caught.
So let's just
I guess.
say
And I
that-
think the danger that you're running into now is throwing any construction project in the commercial district into site plan approval has a really strong chance of having a chilling effect on redevelopment for businesses in the business district.
So a change of use, though, could change the end impact. If it goes from an office use to a medical office use in terms of the parking requirements.
So Tim, I understand what you're saying. What advice would you provide? Because I definitely understand what you said. We wouldn't want to be so restrictive.
Right. To be
But-
for any interior change.
Well, I think you need to think kind of. I don't have an exact answer to this question, except I mean to Cheryl's point about a change of use, and I think when we talk about change of use, we're talking about lowercase u use, because this is applicable to commercial projects in the business district. These are all business district uses that we're talking about. So when we talk about a change of use, we're talking about from an office to a restaurant or whatever. I think that to the extent that an interior change is having a different impact, you need to look at how the other components of the zoning that are meant to address those impacts are operating on those different uses. I mean, parking is kind of the highlight example. Different uses have different parking requirements. So if you change from office to restaurant, you're also going to trip, a different parking requirement that frankly, would probably require some type of exterior change to the site, which would again hit your 800 square foot threshold. So I think to the extent that, the concern is that an interior change is going to have other types of impacts, you need to look at, because these are all projects that are going to be subject to zoning otherwise. And so, what is site plan approval actually doing, vis-a-vis those other, requirements? I just think, again, like, folks are doing, we had, one of the salons on Adam Street, it became a bridal suite. Are those different uses? How does that distinction get made? The uses that are listed in the business district zoning are not great when it comes to differentiating between kind of similar types of businesses. So I just think you need to think about, is this going to bring someone who's just, going from one type of business to another? Is this going to trip site plan approval, which, again, is supposed to be for, larger or more unique or more disruptive projects, not just simply, there's a different type of business coming in here. So Sean, not a great answer to your question, but I think the ultimate kind of answer is, what are your other dimensional and other requirements in your zoning doing to address those impacts?
Yeah, no, I think your answer was really helpful. I understand.
What about if we kept the current sentence that's in here and said, unless there is significant change of use to be determined by the planning board? Which gives us the decision, is this so significant? Is this going from a restaurant to, or a retail store to a restaurant? Is this enough of a significant use?
From office space to a
And
movie
leave that
theater.
determination. So it wouldn't trigger anything if we didn't find it, if a normal site plan approval came before us and we didn't feel that there was any significant change of use. It was one boutique to another boutique, or
But yet it's still for someone who's reading the language, it is subjective, right? It's the planning board's determination that would be, we'd be the ones determining that, it's not.
Whether it's.
So that's sort of what, I struggle with when you, as an applicant, it would be nice to have a document that you can read and you know what is expected of you. And it doesn't matter if you're in a business district or in a residential district, or I don't know, it's just, there should be a uniform set of rules. And that's what I struggle with, is there's not a uniform set of rules.
So I can tell you, in the building code, there's a distinction between what's called a business use and an assembly use. The assembly use has a lot more people, and it's still a business use, but it triggers more requirements. I'm kind of thinking about it's like an assembly use, which is just a bigger impact on what potentially to neighbors. So you go from something that's an office space to a movie theater, or something that has a lot, or a restaurant or something like that. So I don't know if that would help to say from a type or a business use to a business that is considered an assembly use. Or we could give an example such as restaurant or theater or something.
Could you say a greater impact? A use to a sort of a use that has a greater impact on the area?
So one thing I would say is what determines the impact, what cause, I think
assembly means,
assembly just
volume.
means a lot more people, which to me means a lot, potentially more parking. So, or more, if it's a restaurant, it could be, where's your exhaust? Because if exhaust is dumping onto the sidewalk because there's no other place to put it, you want to look at that. So, because, you all may have parked below something on the street where the exhaust is there and the grease is coming down. And it sounds so hypothetical now, but there's situations like that. So I'm just trying to capture those situations, but I get Tim's point. Yeah. So if we can think of language that goes from business, some type of a business use that's considered an assembly use in the building code or something like that. Might be a way at least to be able to identify, you look it up. We can put a pin on it and
that's what I was going to say. Maybe we should just come back to that. But do you want Tim to write that down, what you just said, that the assembly use?
I think they could, if Cheyenne's doing that, maybe just put a comment there that the board wants to come back to this and consider this. Consider assembly use.
A change of assembly use. Great. Okay. And then you wanted to add for mixed use, a line. Did you have a recommendation for that?
I didn't come up with language, but
then maybe we could
it
put
would
into
just
A.
find similar to A, or just add it to A.
Maybe add it.
Tim, do you have a thought about that?
Can you repeat that?
That whether we can just add mixed use to paragraph A, or do we need a separate paragraph that captures?
I think that would be fine.
Adding it to.
I mean, I don't have, attorney could look at that and say, no, you're an idiot. Do it the other way. But I think, the types of buildings that we're looking at, multifamily or mixed use, are substantially similar types of things.
All right,
So
so I
that's
would say-
capturing kind of the same thing.
All right, so I would
I
say
don't think there
right
should be a
after-
problem.
Sorry, Tim. Okay, thank you. I would say right after the word no, put mixed use, and then it goes to multifamily.
All right.
Mixed use, comma, multifamily, well, and continue, because the rest of it really kind of refers to the multifamily.
Yeah, right there, Cheyenne. Perfect.
Yeah.
Mixed use, comma, multifamily.
I was looking through the Lexington, Newton, what else do we have? Brookline. I don't know if I have Brookline.
Brookline didn't have one, right?
So if you go to now B, so it's 3B under submission requirements.
Oh, we're jumping, are we on submission requirements now?
That was the next thing, right?
So one thing before we get to that,
Mm-hmm.
to your point to these guys earlier, you talked about a pre-meeting meeting. So I don't know if,
Like where that would
so
go?
I added a pre-application conference.
Oh, good. Where did you put that?
Oh, and
Or
way down in
All
my
right.
notes that I added, but
Okay,
that's
but
what.
that's good.
So it would, petitioners are encouraged to discuss proposed applications with the staff of the office prior to formally submitting.
So I'm seeing that as number 4, like right after what we just discussed. Am I missing some?
Under procedures, I would put it, but I had, or wait,
Well, submission requirements, pre-application conference, it's exactly what Maggie just read.
I was
Still
so
on page
serious.
1. Do I have a different document or something?
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at this up
It's in
here.
red?
In mine.
Oh, that's not that. Okay.
So I would
Oh, boy.
say then you wanted to put it number 3 and move submission
Well,
requirement
I sort of was
down.
going through like,
Yeah.
if you were going in to start a project, like what's the sequence of events? The sequence of events is you read this thing and you're like, okay, what do I have to do? And so one of the first steps is a pre-application conference.
Yeah, I think it would go, you would have a new paragraph between applicability and submission requirements.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing that in my, I don't understand. It's actually here on my document that
Did you
I'm
write
looking
this,
at.
Maggie?
That was Maggie's, so,
Now,
see,
I
this
just
is,
added mine on the bottom.
Well, there's one in here that says pre-application conference, right? Is that what you're reading, Jim? And it
Yeah,
reads, petitioners are encouraged to discuss proposed applications with the staff. Maybe Tim captured that?
Yeah, okay.
Wish I.
Jim, if you're looking at the document that's in the folder, that is a different document from what's on the screen right now.
Okay.
Right, so which one should I be looking at? Just looking at the
You have to
screen?
Jump back and forth.
Yeah, just look at the
This is
screen.
where you added it, okay.
So how do I get the one on the screen?
I'll
on my
I'll
computer?
send it to you.
Okay.
Cheryl sent this afternoon, and we didn't get a chance to send it out to everybody.
Okay.
I wasn't sure which one we were going to be looking at on the screen.
Yeah.
So if we want to, we can just run through one and then run through the other. It might be easier rather than jumping back and forth.
that's what,
If you want.
I
mean, we
also
could
wanted-
Yeah,
continue-
I thought because all of Maggie's changes were at the end, we could get to
Yeah.
that other one at the end.
No, I don't mind.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and you can cut out everything you want. I just,
No, yours is right here, and I think it's great. I'm just saying,
Well, it might
it's
have
literally
been-
number 4, right? So
Just
right after what we just discussed, it's right here.
Yes, that's,
So,
I was confused because I didn't see it, but.
yeah, it's all
so
good.
let's go back to
Working off of
Cheryl's where we
earlier,
were with
Nice to all be literally on the same page.
submission
Yeah,
requirements.
under
Okay.
submission requirements on B, I thought we should add these words. This is just really,
Can't read
we
that.
should have, these are on a standard survey, but we can be clear about that, okay?
Yep. I think
And
that's-
then also I added, again, these come from looking at some of the others, a zoning narrative. Usually they provide a table, but I think it's good to be clear what we're looking for. And then there were landscape plans and architectural plans were lumped into the same paragraph. I don't think that's appropriate. So I separated them. And then made it clear it was building elevations and building sections, and added the site sections representing the slope cuts and fills, and structures, retaining walls, and significant land features. I mean, like tonight, I mean, that's just one of the most significant pieces of information we can have.
Do we want to add volumes there too, Cheryl? Or when we say site sections that graphically represent all slope cuts and fills, do you want to know the
You want
volumes
volume
too?
calculation?
It'd be good to know. Yeah, it'd be good to know the volumes.
Okay, we can add volumes.
Cheyenne, if you put the word "and" volumes, it's probably fine. Probably volumes is good too. That's okay.
And then on the photometric plan, it seemed like you don't want to do that for like a small project that's probably not going to have site lighting. So I picked 10 parking spaces as a trigger point for it. Does that make sense for everyone? And the same thing for the traffic impact analysis. I think on a 3-unit, we don't need a traffic impact, but it seems like one site having 10 spaces kind of is a, that seemed like to be a trigger in others too, 10 to 20. And then I saw a trigger for a different height in a different one of the other bylaws, but I thought we're allowed 35 pretty much anywhere as our standard. So it seemed like a shadow study should be triggered anything above that height. So we can be a little bit more clear about that. And then I really think a preliminary construction management plan is helpful just to understand, because some of these sites are built out so tight that, like, if they're going to need to close or take parking spaces, like for 440 Granite Ave.
That's what I was gonna say. I think 440 Granite.
I think those kind of sites we should just have something in the record for. And then the parking, we haven't really focused on that part of the bylaw. That is where the parking and transportation demand management, but it's in our zoning. And that's in the same section that has the mitigation fees. Those are only triggered in certain instances, so it wouldn't be triggered like for this project that we were looking at tonight, a Dover amendment use. It's just an overlay or a special permit, but there are times when we'll be doing both, so.
I think Dover allows for parking now, a parking review.
But not the mitigation fee in our bylaw. It's, our bylaw says it's just for special permits or overlay districts. I actually think it should be in the business district. We tried to change that once. It didn't get approved at town meeting, or it was sent for further study and never got further study.
You can say we studied it.
Let's see. Tim had a question on the narrative of compliance with the design standards. So I think that's a question really for town council in terms of whether we can put those in.
I think we did see some in some, I want to say Brookline, I don't know if it was Brookline or Newton, but I feel like they had some design standards within their site plan approval. And did you put, and I think you added those.
I put some in, yeah.
That came from other towns that have been, that were approved.
I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate, like
particularly
the standard itself, but
with the
I thought it would be
MBTA,
helpful.
because I think they did it at the time,
So we can look at those under procedures. I won't give a number now, but under procedures, I thought we should remove the language site plan review authority and just put planning board. So there was 3 instances of that. And then I had seen this previously when doing the MBTA community zoning, that you can put in, and it was confirmed in one of the workshops I did with Judy Barrett at that time, that you can put this requirement for outside consultants into site plan review. So we're getting it, but what if just like tonight, if it's not like explicit, they don't have to really do it. So I think we should put it in to be explicit.
Good addition.
I did under review standards.
I had a few.
So, okay.
But some are, I pulled from Natick, some, I like some of the things that they, some of the things are duplicitous, but some things we don't have that they have. So maybe we should just we can walk through.
Okay, so I'm just gonna walk through what I put, and then you guys, we
Yep.
can walk through what you put. So instead of saying siting of facilities, I thought, again, being more explicit.
Yeah,
And say
I agree.
consideration of site design, and then I list location and configuration of structures and the relationship of the site structures to nearby structures in terms of major design elements, including scale, massing materials, roof and cornice lines, and color. So that was just, and then under historic significance, I added, and impacts on historic structures or landscapes. And I added towards the end, avoidance of major topographical changes.
Is that strong enough language, though?
Well, we can get,
Yeah.
I added another, I think, or maybe I took it out 'cause I was unsure, but I think I must have taken it out being unsure.
So maybe should I just read out? Oh, you keep going with yours.
Well, I'm almost done with what changes I made. Design guidelines, I put that in, that we could adopt them, because I'm pretty sure that in that same workshop, I was told that we could do that. Maybe it's not under Dover Amendment, so we might have to.
Can we just,
for that.
sorry, not to interrupt, but can we just stay with site plan approval?
Sure.
And then the things that I added, I could just add, I could read off and we could add into this document now, just and be sort of move through the section. One of the things that I liked was the design of the streetscape and transitioning between abutting properties. Because I think we run into that.
Okay.
We can go back and take this out if we don't think so. Could you just add that, Cheyenne? Sorry. It's the design of the streetscape and transitioning between abutting properties.
So is that more like street lights, or is that more like awnings on buildings and?
It's more streetscape, like plantings in between, like how it's buffered. You know, the site is buffered, transitioning between, and it maybe even be frontage streetscape. There's a connection between the various buildings.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. It's actually, right above. It's under site plan review. We'd be just adding another line item, Okay. Yep.
Sorry, could you just repeat that line for me?
Sure. The design of the streetscape and transitioning between abutting properties.
I'll fix the formatting.
That's okay. And you know what? Is it easier to cut and paste the section from the other document going over to?
Yes.
That might be easier. Yeah, it's just this section and some things are duplicates. Yeah, if you want to just cut and paste that whole section, and then we can eliminate some of these things that are duplicates. But if you just take all of that, yeah. And then we can pop that over and then go through. Because some of these Cheryl has already addressed.
Okay.
So, so we could take out number 1 and number 2 on that I just, because the layout and the site, that's Cheryl just basically added that. And then after the design of the streetscape, the protection and mitigation of adjoining properties against detrimental impacts. I sort of like, and that is to include surface water, drainage, light, sound, and site buffers, and preservation of views, light, and air. We can change this if we want, but I just thought that was
Excuse me.
good. I think the provision of vehicular access, parking, and circulation, I think that was in the other one.
Might have been covered elsewhere.
But they
I
also,
think I put something in on that.
but they also added, which is the accommodation of non-vehicular multimodal access and circulation. So that was bicycle, like giving,
Yeah.
you know,
That's huge.
so we could cross out the vehicular access, parking, and circulation, if that's already in there? Because is it already in ours?
We should think about whether it does have multimodal.
Yeah, so let's actually, Cheyenne, let's leave that for now, just to make sure we already have it in another location. But yes, so the
Because if we
multimodal
go back
access.
to like E and F, circulation and connectivity that is safe and accessible for all, and then it says effective, efficient transportation systems and the adverse impacts of motor vehicle transportation. But it's not explicit to multimodal, but that's where it would go, I think, somewhere in there.
So we can think about like just rewording that and maybe, the next one, the management of emergency service and loading/delivery operations, access and circulation. I think that's really important. We always are talking about our loading and delivery operations. The next one was the location and arrangement of municipal, public, and private infrastructure and utilities, because that also does come up, like where they're putting their utilities is something that I think we'd like to include. I think this is already in there, but the provision of stormwater management features and measures, and this is also the protection and management of surface and groundwater. I think the way we currently have it is probably fine. So I think you could take out these two, because I think we cover that. Stormwater and management in our existing. The management of solid waste and snow removal. I don't think we had that in ours. So I would ask to keep something regarding that in there. The development of a sustainable, climate-sensitive, and environmentally conscious site.
It's up in B.
We've got that.
Yep.
Okay, so we can eliminate that one.
Mm-hmm.
The development of sustainable can be crossed off. I thought this was interesting. Site and building security and fencing.
Comes up.
Yeah. So let's keep that in. Site lighting. I think we have that in there, but I can't recall exactly, but site lighting we can keep in and see if that's a duplicate, but site and building signage. I think we just have signage maybe in ours. So this is site and building signage. It's a little more specific. And then this was interesting. They had other aspects of site design that may be reasonably within the spirit and intent of this section and the purview of the planning board.
That will be good for non-Dover amendment uses, but.
I know that goes to your being subjective, but maybe we keep it in there and think about that, because this is in theirs. All right, that was it that I had for that section.
So that comes back to, if we go, like the beginning of this says, review standards. The planning board in its regulations shall establish standards for site plan review that will, at a minimum, address the following. So that means we need to develop standards for all of those things. But then I put something else in, which I pulled from what was in the MBTA zoning, that we could adopt by simple majority design standards. Which maybe is similar to what you were doing. but like the location of garage entrances, the protection of significant natural site features, the location and design of open spaces, because open spaces sometimes are just the setback areas and they're not really, significant open spaces. So I think maybe we need to think about these two sections a little bit more. So maybe like the design guidelines can be first and then some of these other things can, or maybe we pull out some of what's in this and add them in the list format,
Would what you have be a good time to insert at this point with the design, or you've got a whole section, maybe we.
Yeah, so this was just taken from the Westport site plan approval.
Does it start up here, Maggie,
And
on
I
the
wasn't-
right-hand side?
And I wasn't sure what's appropriate or not. So I'm having a hard time really understanding what we can regulate in site plan approval. I just think about if you're an applicant and you're coming here, you want to know what is expected of you. And so, I'm always harping on the size of trees. And if, like this other plan that just came in, their tree size were 6 to 8 feet. So I think we should just have a standard of a tree size. And I don't have necessarily an opinion right now, but it should be, at least 10 feet. So every person who's coming to town, when they do their landscape plan, they give it to their landscape architect and they know to design a plan with 10 feet. So then they're not going back to their landscape architect and saying, oh, Milton, you put 6 to 8 feet, but Milton wants 10 or 12 feet. So I don't know is that allowed to be that specific? Because I think it should be the same, no matter if you're on one side of town or another, the tree size is important.
I think it depends on the site though. Like if you have a very small site, you're not going to need the same size as a large site. I do like here though, if we're looking at what you have on the screen, that paragraph about adjustments, but that's not on the design side yet. So if you
we're
wanted
not
to
saying,
go,
but we're not saying what type of tree, because to your point, yes, a certain site might not require a tree that gets to be like a maple or an oak, but you still need a tree. And it could be a crab that maxes out at 15 feet, but you're starting at least with a 10-footer. There's no.
yeah, so I think in the standards, so review standards and the design and the guidelines, that we could add something that is landscaping to provide sufficient buffer.
Yeah, but sufficient to me is like being because I was an applicant, and I'm putting my
sufficient to provide screening. So
well, I think that's where we have review site in our. I'm sorry. In our, what do we call it? Our review standards, that we have open space, natural feature, landscape is just.
And even like for the volume of cut and fill, would we ever consider having a maximum? Like you cannot cut more than X cubic yards.
I just think some of these things are going to be
unless you give a waiver. Because if they can't, like the guys who were here earlier, what are they cutting? 10,000 cubic yards. So if they knew that they couldn't cut more than 5,000, maybe they would have come in with a different plan. And again, it saves the applicant money.
Does,
because
but
they're not
I mean,
going back and
but I mean,
forth.
some of that is all of that is going to, all of these things are going to be relative to differing sites.
I know.
A 10-foot tree, we might find it to be too big on some particular sites. And And if a site is 20 acres, cutting 10,000 feet is not, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just, I don't know.
That's too much.
We could be so restrictive with some of this that it creates a problem.
So just for efficiency of time, what I'm thinking, maybe, because you added so much good stuff that I think I haven't really had a chance to read through it.
Yeah.
So maybe for tonight, we go through, we'll let Cheryl go through her edits, because I really don't have anything else after this point.
Yeah,
And I
that's
don't know if
fine.
other
And
people
again,
do, but.
you could.
No, but I thought a lot of it
everything.
was really good. You pulled from
I
some things.
I haven't had a chance to look at it, so.
So why don't we
I can't
finish
even find it still, so it's all
for
good.
tonight,
Weird.
finish through this, and then for the next meeting, we read through Maggie's things, and it may be, we'll figure out how to insert those things in different places, because I think they're really good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The document in our folder is 17 pages long, and this is not our best time. We are not at our best.
Plus, I
But we've gotten
I
through
still
the-
want to save
We've
time
gotten
to
through the
touch on
bulk of the
MBTA.
framework. It's just what we're gonna maybe add and beef
I want
it
to
up.
save a little time to touch on MBTA also. Our forum
we
that's
have to
coming
talk
up, and it's past 10, so
This won't take
I
long.
turn into a
Yeah.
pumpkin.
So let's finish.
That's all good.
Yeah. With
So,
Cheryl's.
yeah, if, I know there's not a lot more added here, honestly.
So design guidelines.
I just thought under authority of the board, being explicit that we could impose reasonable conditions. Because we can. And then,
Should we add that to where authority up top?
so that's the
Or combine
question.
those? Or,
Well, this is
or maybe
authority
take
of-
mine out and put what I wrote down here, but they might be
Okay, well, we can take a look.
visit us on that.
at what- But I do think it should be somewhere. I don't know which is the best spot for it. This next one I highlighted in yellow because this is where, we were talking about if we could rescind a decision. And I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but I just wanted to flag it. And then just in the spirit of keeping moving, that's just pinned, right? And then the decision, this came from Lexington, the decision of the planning board shall be a majority vote of the board is constituted, so 3. And then project phasing, I forgot where I saw this, but I don't know, we haven't seen projects in my time on the board that are phased, except for Wolcott Woods is like 3 or 4 phases. So it just seems like it's worth having. Because you also don't want projects to be phased to avoid affordable housing requirements.
Yep.
Which I thought was good. And then I thought, again, this is from somewhere else, this appeal, that there is a right to appeal, and maybe doesn't need to be here because it's implicit somewhere else. And then it would be good to get the Dover Amendment uses that are listed here from Lexington. Just whether we need to be more explicit anywhere else in all of this about how Dover Amendment is handled.
Right. And I wanted to add, actually, and I forgot this under review standards too, but I wanted to maybe add this line and add it to the limited review standards. A line, and Tim was not sure if we could do this, but this is a question for our council. Consistency of aesthetic character, including bulk and height of surrounding buildings. If we can write. Consistency of aesthetic character, including bulk and height of surrounding buildings.
And you know what I recently learned?
We also put that under where we had the design review standards also. If we scroll up and just add that same line and see if it's acceptable to include that. Because I think that's what we run into a lot. Like just tonight, we were saying, is it aesthetically, does this fit in? And
So I recently learned that on the state government's website, there's a municipal law unit. They have a depository of decisions. And so if you type in the search, you can type in like scope of site plan, and it brings up all the decisions. So I started typing in, scope of site plan, and then it brought up all sorts of decisions to see what was accepted and what wasn't accepted.
Good to see.
So, I mean, there's a lot. So just to go through and see if, so I just found this out today. So I didn't go in to check to see if, it's legal to put in some of the things that I thought, or if it really is more of a, like our aspirations of what we're looking for.
But didn't you take them from other town site plan approvals?
Yeah. So, but I wasn't sure exactly if it was site plan approval or if it was one of their rules and regulations, because they were together. It's like one
Special permit versus site plan approval.
Yeah, they're right next to each other.
Yeah.
That, when looking at them, sometimes they are kind of lumped together and they're not separated out.
Yeah.
But I'll be happy to review what you found, what you put together,
Yeah,
Maggie,
and take
for
a
the
look at
next
that.
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tim, I don't, you can
And
take
I'll
a
try
look
and
too
get
to
them
see.
to folks before the last minute.
Yeah, and I'll read those because it looked interesting. It was, I thought what you put together. So good. Well, I think this was the first opportunity we really had to get into this, so we can come back and revisit.
So Cheyenne, can you share out that marked up that you worked on? And then you said the one with Maggie's is in our folder for tonight? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was updated. Yeah.
It was just on the document, like in the Google, the folder.
The folder,
That I
okay.
just,
Google folder.
Okay.
Okay.
Draft planning board, which one?
Okay. So, and we'll definitely have this on for the 21st. We'll continue this discussion.
So when you speak to the warrant committee, are you going to tell them that this is one that we think we're going to shoot? Do you think we can try and get something for February for this?
That's what
one?
I'm
hoping? Yeah.
So what I was and I was just gonna talk to you all about this, is it is my goal, and but I think we can get it done. I would like to have a site plan review and an ADU article, because February 2nd, I know some of you were on the UHLC's little talk on ADUs. It's going into effect February 2nd, but they're not going to have any guidelines or any regulations now. What they're saying they're going straight for. So it's going to be open to somebody comes in, applies for an ADU, and we'll have nothing. If we don't pass something, and we can always amend it later, but if we don't have something, somebody can come in and won't have setbacks, won't have, sort of all the things, the meat that, that we studied this extensively before you were on the board. We really, there was a lot of good things in the article. It really came down to a split on the board of whether it should be by right or special permit. We now know that it has to be by right. We don't have a choice, but there are things that we can control. We can limit the number of ADUs per site. We know that things that we can't do, like we can't require it to be owner occupied. So in the law, there's certain things that we know. So I think Tim has already done a draft, or you've looked at taking out what's not allowed in the law, but we don't have a choice.
Yeah, we've got a markup of the last ADU article that kind of tries to make it as consistent as possible with the legislation. So we'll share that for the next meeting whenever you guys
That would be great.
want to talk about it.
So I think that would be my goal, is to be able to get these two ready, especially if it's, I would prefer, the end of February, which sounds like that's what maybe the warrant committee is thinking it would be more likely. And of course.
So when would I guess we need to find out when we would need to submit.
That's what the draft. Tim, we have to have 90 days of public hearing, 90 days prior to the town meeting?
No, the public hearing could be, you don't want to do it the day before, obviously, but it doesn't have to be 90 days before. I'll take a look at the timeline and try to map it out.
So maybe that was when we have to have a draft to the warrant. Well, they would like the draft to be to the warrant committee, but we could be working on it still and making some
I think
tweaks
the
and
way,
changes.
if I recall correctly, it goes to print at least a month before town meeting. So let's say it goes to print at the end of January, and then they need to review it. You know, you know how it is, sometimes there's a green sheet, they don't have a recommendation when it goes to print. But it'd be nice for them to have something, right? So I think if we tried to target the end of the year, so that left January for review and revision and going to print.
I think it's
not too many
doable.
meetings, but.
Yeah, but I'd like to
We
give
could
them
add
whatever we're
another
working
meeting or
on,
in
just so they can,
January.
even if it's incomplete, just as a courtesy to them.
January, we could add meetings if need be.
That was always Dave Humphrey's complaint, is that he gets things late.
Yeah, I think.
Always rushed.
But if we could narrow this down, I think the site plan review is not too complicated. We just have to get it to a lawyer and make sure we have everything in it that we want. But the framework is, I think we're pretty solid with the framework. The ADU, which everybody will see, it's a good template, and then we can work to see what we would want to update on that and the things that Tim's put in.
I think if Tim, maybe if you're speaking to town councils, say after our next meeting, we might have a draft ready for them to look at, just to get an idea. We don't want to spend too much time going down a road that we're going to have to backtrack from. So I'd like to get a sense from what we've put in so far and what you're looking at, Maggie. Do we need to separate out Dover Amendment uses versus other site plan? And even, I know we have restrictions under site plan because you're not really supposed to be denying it. We're trying to, but we want a little more, I think anyway, a little more oomph to guide the design, which we don't have as much of currently.
Which is helpful, I think, to the applicants. Yeah, if we can do that.
Yeah, my understanding is I think maybe we could send a draft over to the municipal law unit and they could review it if we're, for them for review, and then they can come back and let us know.
But maybe we send it to Peter Mello first, because that, just to give a quick cleanup of things and then send that over. I think that's,
I think I'd like to see what his advice would be on that too.
Right. Okay. All right, good. So, so I just wanted to just talk to you all and see your thoughts on this. We're scheduled to have a public forum next Thursday. Currently, this week have had some concerns and am considering want us to consider whether we should postpone this public forum for a variety of reasons. The first, I think it's just we might be a little premature in doing this. And Cheryl, I know you've been working on these slides, and I'm grateful. It may be premature for, first of all, like the gentleman said who came, we have a significant case pending before the Supreme Judicial Court. And so I am very cautious on what we're saying, what we're debating, what the public is, how they're approaching this and looking at this. But really, I think we don't know what the SJC is going to decide. I think this could go in a number of different directions, and they can be looking at this on a variety of different levels. And so we have no idea exactly how the decision is going to be made at this point. I'm thinking about our time and resources of this. I think we can get these two things done, and maybe using our time, our time would be best used focusing on this and not, because we can tweak and we can keep tweaking. We've had 65 meetings on this. I feel like we've laid a really good groundwork. So all of the work that we've been doing, going through the scorecards, everything, I think we have a really good understanding of what districts we think are, would be best. We just don't know what scenario that we're going to be looking at. So rather than producing, as we said before, the 3 different plans, we didn't know we had to do an ADU. We have to get ADU done too in this short period of time. So I also am just a little concerned that in this forum, we don't really even have a plan quite yet. We still have the last two districts that we're evaluating. And I just don't want to set ourselves up and the community to start getting, their anxiety levels raised, thinking, oh, this is going to be a 25%, or you're looking at, East Milton, or you're looking at Granite, and start debating these things when we're not even to that point. And we might not, necessarily need to discuss all of these different districts. So my feeling is, I think I would like to postpone doing this. We're going to have to absolutely do a public hearing, and everything that we've been talking about is public, so nothing is not being transparent. I just don't know that I feel that we want to go to a forum and get people worked up unnecessarily, if that makes sense. But I would leave it up to, I would like to ask what others.
So I heard, that next Thursday is also the Randolph Ave Chickatawbit roundabout. So that's what I had,
right, which is
I said that I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to make the MBTA forum. The roundabout is really important to my neighborhood, and 1,800 residents signed the petition to not support the roundabout. And it is through MassDOT, in which we don't have control over MassDOT scheduling. And it's really at the end of the design phase. So that's what I was going to say, is I might not have been able to attend the forum anyway. So a postponement would be very beneficial to me.
I would like to go too. I haven't really been partaking in any of those, but
I would be afraid that we're tipping our hand to the Supreme Judicial Court if we start coming up with plans and saying, oh, look, we've got this, we're on track for this plan, or we're on track for that plan. I doubt they're listening to our meetings, but I'm sure they're getting word as to what's going on in Milton. So I think if we wait for them to render their decision and let us know what we should be doing, I think at that point, we come up with a plan, we have the forum, we write the article.
I think we can act pretty quickly.
We started discussions on this in a contract with MAPC in the spring. Their contract is in May, I think.
Okay.
So we've taken from May until now.
Mm-hmm.
If the AG
UTL.
with UTL, yeah. So if the court decides with the AG that the remedy is that we have to have zoning, whatever level, within 3 months of that decision, we will say the decision comes in December, which is again what the AG requested. If we don't have, I just don't think 3 months is a lot of time to get public feedback, which is something we said that the public came to us in February and said, we want to be informed. You need to keep us in the process. People have said that at multiple meetings. So I am concerned that we haven't talked about the scorecard. We haven't talked about the survey results. And we haven't said we've looked at commuter rail locations. And it's just giving them the background of what we've talked about. And we've not we're exploring, and I take exception to the fact that the referendum was a rejection of the full implementation. What the rejection was zoning that was approved by town meeting, and that's all that we can infer from it. So if we look at other sites, we show people that it's not as easy as some might think to pick a different site in a different location. And we run through how our consultant runs through how these things work. So I don't think it's anything that's showing any solution, any proposal. It's showing that the board isn't just sitting on its hands and waiting for a decision. So we've advertised it. The town has put it out there. Milton Scene's put it out there. I don't know where else it's been put out. So it's just to show the public. And if it's postponed for conflict, I don't have a problem, but I have a problem with canning it completely and waiting for a decision.
Yeah, and the other thing I had a problem with, I don't know if you read the Times today, but on the front cover, I mean, there was a huge article about MBTA zoning, and what it never mentioned, like the possibility that the SJC could rule that it's an opt-out, an opt-in. So I sort of felt that that article wasn't 100% accurate. And,
I think the thing to remember is it says shall, but what the question that I understood from watching is whether that's the sole remedy is loss of grants. And I will point out, as I said in the email that I forwarded all of you, that there was recently announced $161 million in one-stop grants, which we are ineligible for, that went to 300 projects in 171 communities. So it's not that we just opt in or out. We lose access to funding and significant amounts of funding. And that's the other thing that will be decided. I
think that's going to be part of the SJC, and that's where they're going to also be determining the penalty, like what penalties can be imposed.
Yeah, and I don't think we've been sitting on our hands. I think we've been working pretty hard, and I think we have our districts almost determined.
But we haven't gained any.
I think we have them all scored, and I think we're ready to go.
And I'm not gonna, I haven't put an awful lot of time in, right, over the last few months into any of this, but the time I have put in, and then I read Tim's email this morning or today about the analysis that Tim and Cheyenne did on St. Pius and on 711 Randolph Ave. And, it appears that no matter what becomes the requirement, we're pretty limited in what we can do.
We need to show
let me finish though, if you don't mind. We are pretty limited, and I know time evaporates, and I understand what you're saying about, 3 months is a short period of time, but based on what we've all learned from what we've gone through, we don't have a lot of options. So, I consider what we went through probably the most tension and conflict that I can remember our town having, this whole issue, town-wide yes versus a town-wide no. And, I think we're going to resume, that conflict once we start getting into a public forum. I feel like the work, and I'm going to give you guys a lot of credit because I haven't been present for many meetings. I was here in the beginning, but I feel like the analysis on what it could be and what it probably will be, whatever percentage we're deemed required, it's not going to take us long, at this point to finish it. What happens in the public forum is, you mentioned anxiety. While it'll be anxiety for some, it's going to be excitement for others, and once we start going down that road of anxiety for some and excitement for others, those that might become excited are the ones that get relieved, that feel like there's a potential burden in their particular area, and they start getting excited because we're presenting something that would eliminate that potential burden. So while I definitely understand that time goes really fast, I don't think, given what we've all learned in terms of what we can do and what we can't do, that 3 months is a short period of time at all. It really isn't. And I'll close.
I'm committed to making, once I know what the SJC's decision, I feel like it's also a better use of our money and resources for the town. The time, I look at our time, I look at Util's time, and what we're paying Util to maybe be running down, a rabbit hole that may be completely not what we end up doing.
I kind of fall, I fall in this area that, my preference is, let's resolve the dispute before we engage the community. I mean, we can engage the community, and people have had an opportunity to attend the meetings or go back and listen to what we talked about in the meetings. That's all out there for people to do that. And I love a public forum, but I think right now we can't say anything to anybody. If we gather the public together, we can listen to them, but we're going to face questions that we don't have a lot of answers to questions. And then we're going to have people both anxious and, and like I said, excited. I don't know that, in my opinion, I think the costs outweigh the benefits of gathering everybody together at this particular point in time. And like I said, I don't think 3 months is a short period of time, because it appears from everything that we've done, we don't have a lot of options.
Well, I will say that there were, I don't know how many public forums, and we got to the zoning in December, and then we got to a referendum in February, and people said it was sprung upon them. They knew nothing about it. And it had been worked on for a year, and there were plenty of meetings and plenty of public forums. You say today, and we say today, we think we know what it's going to be. We have communicated zero other than our meetings to the public, and most people don't watch our meetings, and most people aren't checking our agenda items to see, and waiting till 10 or 11 to see whether we're going to talk about MBTA communities, because that's the only time we've gotten to it, is very late. So I think, as I said, if we delay this, I don't think it's realistic to think that we should have a process that is concluded in 3 months that includes public input, because we're going to be in the same position that we were in before. And now, instead of the select board making the decision, people are going to say the planning board makes the decision. And it's the public that needs to weigh in on all of the things, including the district scorecard. If you look at the survey results like I did since last week, and I could have used my time for other things, so I would have appreciated a heads up. That the public input on the community survey is consistent with our district scorecard. And so I think the public needs to hear about the scorecard and how we plan to use it before we show them a zoning plan, because they need to be brought along in the same way. They shouldn't just be delivered a final plan. And I'm going to say that as my last pitch. And I'm outnumbered here, so whatever you want to do with when we schedule this, I want to be on the record that we need plenty of time to have public input before we think that we've got a plan we're going to take to this town meeting.
Thank you, Cheryl, and I appreciate that. But we have done outreach with that survey, and we clearly, because people did come and request it, we made sure that that survey was put on our website. Our scorecard, I believe, is on the website too, Tim, now? And the criteria?
I think the latest version, I think, should be up there, yes.
It is up there, okay, all right. So I think we are putting as much information as we can out there without, I think bringing people together to say, what is the plan? And, I think at this point, it's a little premature.
Yeah, because I feel like, but the AG didn't sue us because we rejected a particular plan. They sued us because we did not comply with the law and the guidelines. So that's...
Well, the referendum was this is the exact vote on what the town meeting voted in December. The referendum didn't say, should we reject the law entirely? The referendum didn't say, should we be 10%? The referendum was purely on the zoning that was approved at town meeting. And so that the town then went and did whatever it said in its lawsuit was not what people voted on. It was what the select board decided to say in its lawsuit. The town didn't get to vote what the select board chose to say in its lawsuit.
Well, that was
The
a
town
counter,
did
that
not
wasn't
weigh
a
in.
lawsuit. We countered their lawsuit.
It's a counter lawsuit, so it's the same thing.
So
Or
the
if
select
you
board
wanna
didn't go
say-
and sue the state sued us.
Yeah,
and the
it's a
select board.
countersuit to it, so it's a lawsuit.
Right.
The public has not weighed in on those arguments, is my point. Because the only thing the public weighed in on in their vote was a particular zoning.
I hear what you're saying. Okay, so
I would appreciate it not being held next week because of the conflict. And I don't think it's appropriate that we've got these two really big issues in town and that you're making residents have to choose which forum to go to get information.
So as I said, the
Thank you.
14th, I don't, because of the conflict between the two meetings, I think that's a sound reason to reschedule, but I think it's a reschedule, not a, we'll wait and see, and then we'll bring people up to speed and say, by the way, we've got a plan for you and it's done. That will
No,
not be well accepted.
No, I think that would not be our approach. And so we do, I know it is, because I did see it was in the paper today. So Tim, can we do something? Can we post something and just get a notification out on the town website that we are going to be postponing the meeting? We'll have to post something at the Council on Aging next week, just signage. I'll be happy to take care of that.
Yeah, we'll get that out on the town website and social media.
And I think it does make sense at this point. So, all right. Is there anything else that anyone else has?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.